Today on
Doomed!
If you listen to this show, you're very likely familiar with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA. But you might not be familiar with this very specific event that Turning Point USA has started to run every year called the Turning Point USA Young Women's Leadership Summit. And on this episode of Doomed with Matt Binder, we are going to take you inside this event where right-wing influencers basically tell young girls and women what to do with their life. Sounds great, doesn't it? And joining me right now, let's bring us both up on the feed so you can see us on the stream. Joining me for this episode to discuss her time at the Turning Point USA Young Women's Leadership Summit is Media Matters for America Deputy Director of Rapid Response, Madeline Peltz. Madeline, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I saw this piece and I was absolutely just completely in the zone when I was reading this. Like, what is going on here? I've heard of these events. I've been generally aware of what happens. But then you went. It was this past weekend, right?
That's correct.
You went and you have a on the ground deep dive into what you saw, the various different speeches, the influencers who were there that we all. I don't know if know and love is the correct terminology, but there's those people. But then there's also some Turning Point USA, young up-and-coming superstars. And this also obviously got on the radar of Fox News. And they had one of these people on Fox News last night to discuss specifically your piece on their event. So really just incredible work all around. So let's jump right in. Madeline, tell me about, start off with your takeaway after going to this event. How was it? What was it fun?
Honestly, it was a little bit fun, if I'm going to be completely honest. But I'm just a little bit of a sicko in that way. I find things like this to be deeply weird and fascinating. I will say that the first thing that I saw when I pulled up to the event was a massive pride flag that Charlie actually addressed in his opening remarks to the conference. But when I pulled up to the hotel, there was an American flag, a Texas flag, and a pride flag. And that was surprising, to say the least. And then in his opening remarks, Charlie Kirk said something to the effect of, I tried to get the pride flag taken down. We're not going to come back to this hotel if they don't do something about this. And directed his vice president of events not to sign the contract until they do something about it. And that was, I think it was actually the first anti-LGBTQ remark that I heard that weekend. So we were about 30 minutes in, and the conference hall exploded in applause. And so that became really an animating force for the entire weekend. But really, this was an exercise in conservative identity politics. And it was really a peek inside the brains of some of the strangest corners of the right-wing media. So it was a little bit terrifying and a little bit fun.
I mean, I will say I've attended a few CPACs, and I've said myself too that they are a lot of fun and again, like you said, very sick and twisted ways. You and me are a special kind of messed up. But I don't know if I'd be prepared because, CPAC, it's got some of your interesting young attendees, but for the most part, it is an older, boomer-aged audience, which is not that, out of this world to see at a conservative event. But I do wonder how I would take in being live at a conservative event where the vast majority of attendees are young. Like, what are we talking about here when we say the young women? It's the Young Women's Summit, right?
It's the Young Women's Leadership Summit.
Leadership Summit.
So I would say Turning Point USA is an organization that historically has its roots as a chapter organization on college campuses, and they've continued to trend downward in terms of who they're targeting. So they have high school chapters now, and then they also have an initiative called Turning Point Academy that it aims to develop curriculum for children as young as in kindergarten. And so they are targeting young people of all ages. It really is like just a massive propaganda machine. I saw in the Washington Examiner, Charlie Kirk gave their tax returns that last year they raised $80 million. That's a tremendous amount of money. So it really has its roots as an organization targeting young people. I would say that it was certainly majority high school and college age girls, and many of these girls are involved in Turning Point USA chapters based on the ones who stood up and asked questions of the speakers. Many of them identified themselves as being directly involved in Turning Point USA. And I think you're right. Excuse me. Like the CPAC crowd is a much more like QAnon pilled boomer crowd. And the Turning Point USA attendees, I think, are young girls who are looking for easy answers in a complicated world, and through whatever unfortunate series of events that has led them to standing in front of Charlie Kirk asking for dating advice. So that was marriage and children and family formation was, besides anti-trans hatred, those were the two most consistent themes of the entire weekend. And I just wish that they were asking basically anyone else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Turning Point USA going after children as young as kindergarten. I mean, we're in a political discourse where the right is constantly calling anyone left of center a groomer, and here they are just openly, directly going after young people. I mean, it's just amazing to hear. And of course, grooming in the actual sense does not apply to Turning Point USA or people left of center just talking about the real world and what goes on with their children, but they like to redefine the term as exactly what they're doing. Apparently, I remember at CPAC there would be these Turning Point USA groups with like the Socialism Sucks shirts, and it was clear that there's the average CPAC attendees who seem like they just organically came. Like this was their idea of fun. They would their husband or wife, they would get them out for the weekend and they go to CPAC. Whereas the Turning Point USA crew looked like they were, bussed in together and were told to go to these events. How organic is this event? Like, do thousands of young women just naturally go to Texas on their own, or is this part of you signed up for the Turning Point USA college campus, the Turning Point USA group on your college campus, and now you're all of a sudden, if you want to stay in the group, you got to go to this event?
So it's definitely heavily subsidized. I did not get the impression that this is a moneymaker for them or anything. Student prices, I think, were $25 with a discount code. And I didn't have a student pass, but I investigated the process. And so the student prices were very low. And then they had a heavily subsidized rooming arrangement, which was if you attended as a student and were applying for housing, they would put you in a room with strangers of 4 to a hotel room. So 2 strangers sharing a bed and 2 other strangers sharing a bed in one hotel room. And that is how they were packing in as many people as possible. It's on their website, this information. And so I know that the tickets are heavily subsidized, the rooming is heavily subsidized. How exactly airfare and transportation is covered, I can't directly speak to. But no, I mean, this is an organization that's funded by right-wing billionaires. It's not like there's a natural grassroots passion for Turning Point USA. Like, what even really is that? What is their message? Because I went to this conference this weekend. I didn't hear anything about voting. I didn't hear anything about getting involved in your local Republican Party. I just heard about getting married and having children. And so, what exactly the message, the political program is for the attendees of the Young Women's Leadership Summit, I didn't hear anything about that. And so, I did hear a lot about this identity politics, the constructing gender constructions that make them comfortable and build a foundation for them to point the finger at non-normative gender expression and justify their own pre-existing bigotry and hatred. That was, I think, a lot of how sort of the anti-trans and like pro-marriage thing goes together. Is this is marriage is good, children is good, a nuclear family is good, and anything else is like bad and worthy to be hated. So I wouldn't say it's an organic event. I wouldn't at all. But I mean, the production value was stunning. On every surface, there was an applique that said, there was one that said Shania Twain, "Let's go girls, Young Women's Leadership Summit." The elevators were covered in YWLS branding. Underneath the stairs, the escalator, like everything was a place where you could take an Instagram photo. So it was a very, very well produced event, and people seemed very engaged with the aesthetics of it.
The event is called the Young Women's Leadership Summit, so you think this would be like, as corny as these like more like mainstream corporate events are, like the girl boss stuff, like the girl power in the office space. Like at least the idea behind that is women feeling empowered to basically follow their career path or their dreams or whatever it is that they choose for their own life. But it seems like this Turning Point USA Young Women's Leadership Summit, from your report, it seemed like it was basically, and you've mentioned it already, the main sort of theme for these young women were you need to settle down and have kids.
Yeah, that was something that I heard over and over again. And again, we're talking about underage girls and girls 18 to 22 making up the majority of this audience. So it's one thing if there was any demonstrated interest in this message, but it really felt like it was being for example, one of the things that really stood out to me from this conference was an exchange between a young girl. She said identified herself as being involved in Turning Point USA at Pepperdine University, and Charlie Kirk. And she said on the microphone, she got up and she said, "I am strongly interested in becoming an orthopedic surgeon. I'm very focused on achieving that goal. And as a result, I haven't thought much about dating." And, the way that she constructed it was that she would be 30 before she was done with residency. Obviously, that's a very ambitious timeline, but, she's probably 19, 20 years old. So whatever. I'll be 30 before I'm done with residency and can think about settling down. And his response to her was, "You're going to need," and again, this is a woman who specifically said, "I'm not interested in getting married and dating." And his response was, "You're going to have to decide which one is more important." I mean, it sounded like she had already decided, but beyond that, his advice to her was, go find a bunch of babies, spend time around them, and if you don't have baby fever by the end of those few days, then you have your answer. And the way that he said it was, his tone was such that if you don't have baby fever, then something's wrong with you. Because he followed up by saying, there are many orthopedic surgeons who are 35 and they have cats, not kids, and they're miserable and they're on antidepressants. That's what he said. And so it's pretty clear that the message is, it's not just like, it's not just expressing an appreciation for motherhood or family formation. There are many paths that women can follow in their lives that are fulfilling. It was specifically that if you are not interested in that, something is wrong with you biologically and likely spiritually, and you will be miserable unless you follow this path. And it's just really stunning because when I was in college, it if someone started talking to me about marriage, I mean, I'm 28 years old and it's still not something that's on my mind, but even if 10 years ago when I was in college, I just would be like, why are you talking to me about this? Like, I'm in school. I want to finish school. It just, you have a bunch of kids in school and you're telling them to get married, especially when you're someone like Charlie Kirk or especially Benny Johnson, who really has some strong creep vibes to him, and is just the type of person that you can't believe exists beyond the internet. But I saw him in person and he is unfortunately very much real. But
if like 2013 internet could be wrapped up in a person and walk around, that's Benny Johnson. Never progressed beyond where internet memes landed in 2013.
And not only that, but as someone who has a long-term appreciation for the Young Women's Leadership Summit, though this was my first time attending, the presentation he gave last year is the same presentation he gave this year. It's like basically the same memes, the same talking points, the same like it was he doesn't have a lot of material despite all of the despite only having to be online for a living. He somehow doesn't see anything good online. But yeah, Benny Johnson.
I can't get over the fact that he's one of, like, I get Charlie Kirk, as weird as he is. I mean, he owns the thing. I get, the other people that I saw you mentioned. We'll get to one of these people in particular who I think most of people listening probably aren't too familiar with. But, Laura Trump was there, Laura Ingraham, Candace Owens. Now, did Candace Owens tell these women to settle down and have kids? Being the expert herself?
She told them to, quote, be more like your grandmother. That's what she said. She said, to the effect of, like, my grandmother knew how to grow food from the ground, and she was taking care of my grandfather and darning our clothes, like this truly, like, very, like, Volksgemeinschaft type of vision of the role of women, like just complete revisionist history. She specifically told this group to be more like your grandmother, at which point my colleague, who also attended this conference with me, leaned over and said, my grandmother was a horrible person. Yeah, that was something she specifically, but I mean, I perhaps your listeners are familiar, likely they are, with Candace Owens, but she will go the farthest to be the most shocking, to get the most clicks. And that was very much reflected in her appearance at this conference. She said something to the effect of every societal ill that we are fighting in this country has been brought on by women. I mean, that's just like there's like the Onion headline that's like Marilyn Manson goes door to door shocking people. That's the kind of energy that Candace Owens was bringing to this conference. And specifically, she's referring to like transgender acceptance. And she says that explicitly, that, it's women, liberal women, who feel bad. Again, this is her characterization, that they feel bad for transgender people, such that, they have led the movement towards acceptance. And that is reflected more broadly in society, that all of these movements for tolerance or greater awareness are led by women, and that is, essentially women should be driven out of public life. The background to all of this is that Candace Owens is a singularly ambitious and craven right-wing media personality who started on InfoWars and didn't stop until she was one of the most famous people in the right-wing media. So she's not someone who's chosen between being a mother and having a public platform and a career. She has been focused on getting famous for the past 6-7 years that her rise has been ongoing. So she's not ever had to make a choice, nor has she considered it. But she's telling a bunch of young women without public platforms that they should specifically dedicate their lives to motherhood, when the reality is, in this country, being a mother is not an easy thing. You don't get maternity leave. You're expected to work even if you don't have financial support, and being financially dependent on your husband, as was as was, envisioned by this conference, puts you in a vulnerable situation in terms of your own safety, in terms of your ability to leave, in terms of your own self-esteem. It can have an impact on that. And so none of the realities of being a mother that come with, well, poverty in America, none of that was reflected in the conversation here. It was just this sort of like 1950s pie in the window type vision of what it means to be a mother. And unfortunately, it's these girls really ate it up.
Right. I mean, everything you just said, it's sort of built in, like it's not, a side effect or accidental. Like that's very purposeful from the right. Like, oh, you have to settle down and have kids, and then you have to stay home with the kids and homeschool them, and you have to serve your husband also. Oh, and you don't have a job, so that means you can't leave your husband. So even if he is, abusive or a horrible person, or you just decide you don't want to be with him anymore, you can't do that because of course we don't believe in divorce. But so you're stuck with him, like all these things, and of course the poverty thing. If you're just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, it's on you if you can't. Oh, you had 3 kids, it's your fault. We told you to have a lot of kids, but we're also going to simultaneously tell you how irresponsible you were for having 3 kids. It's like there's no way to win with them. And what Candace Owens is basically saying there when she telling all these kids to be like their grandparents. Also, I don't know if she realizes how old some of these kids' grandparents are and what age they were. What age they grew up in. A lot of them probably were children of the 70s and 80s, which is not exactly not about women's empowerment. But when she says it, when she's thinking of her grandma and their generation, she's saying be subservient to your husband, obviously. Like, it's just bad advice after bad advice to these young women. And it seems like, for the most part, they sadly eat it up. Now, what is the driving force behind, like you had mentioned, it's pretty devoid of politics. They're not talking about any sort of policy. They're not talking about, any sort of even politicians or electoral politics or anything. It's just about these cultural issues. What is making them like cheer for this stuff? Like, is there any moment when like there was the audience felt like you felt like the audience stopped and like said like, wait, what? Like, or are they just eating this up?
Oh no, the audience came to further entrench themselves in their pre-existing bigotry and paranoid fears about the world and how that and who that makes them. I mean, we as young women, and again, many of these women were younger than me, but still, like, I grew up in a time of dating apps and Instagram and the internet, and there's many, many options that have been presented to me throughout my life about like how to be feminine, how to be a woman, and you make your own choices about how to navigate the many options that are afforded to you, whether you want to reject or accept the mainstream media narratives about how to be a woman in this country or in the world. And I think that the girls at this conference have looked at the same array of options and have decided on right-wing reactionary politics. And that said, I'm not sure that all of them are. I think there were varying degrees in the audience of like how hardcore. Like, some people I think were very involved in Turning Point USA. I think there was certainly a contingency of people that were just curious and had heard about this conference and were in the area. So I don't think like every single person was coming from the exact same background. But that said, consistently throughout the weekend, the loudest cheers and applauses had to do with making fun of specifically Dylan Mulvaney, who is a transgender influencer, for, they're mad at Target for having Pride merchandise. I'm trying to think what other, like that kind of thing. That was consistently saying like my pronouns are USA type thing. Like that was the kind of thing that really got everyone going. And by far, if we're doing the applause meter, by far the biggest reaction was Candace Owens's walkout. I mean, it felt like everyone was there to see her. And so she is a mega, mega celebrity in this world.
Now, there was another person who, speaking of Dylan Mulvaney and the rights obsession with transgender people. That college athlete who's basically become a right wing grifter by just talking about trans people in sports. She was there. Like, what's her name again? Riley.
Her name is Riley Gaines.
Riley Gaines, right? She was there, right?
She was. I actually didn't see her. She was on day 3, and I had had enough by then. But it's hard to miss her as a follower of right-wing media. She is everywhere. She is now working for this reactionary think tank in DC called the Independent Women's Forum. And basically, she has made a career out of being a loser to Leah Thomas several years ago. I mean, that's what it is. It's like she just goes on TV and talks about how she lost over and over again. And I'm so embarrassed for her. It is so pathetic. Of all of the grifts happening in right-wing media, what Riley Gaines has going on is pathetic. And I got the gist of the conference. I had my idea for the piece, and I decided not to stick around for that shining intellectual light of hers.
Right. Her one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
Which is apparently all you need. You got Benny Johnson with the same internet memes every year. You got Riley Gaines now, who's got one specific issue, and it's about how she lost to a trans person, and not even close. Like, we should really hone in on the fact that she lost bad to other cis women too. So let's actually talk about, I guess, the star. And I'm not talking about Charlie Kirk. I'm talking about this person who, I've seen her videos go around. They always sort of strike me as interesting because the aesthetic isn't exactly the normal right-wing, podcast style aesthetic. And that is Alex Clark. And she's this like young Instagram type young woman who is sort of become a Turning Point USA star. And I say that specifically because I don't think she's quite crossed over outside of Turning Point USA's world yet. But she's become like this social media star to like the people who attend this conference, right?
Yes. So to talk, a little bit of background on how Turning Point USA navigates Instagram and social media in general. They have a very expansive ambassador program. So there are many, many young people who are Turning Point USA ambassadors. And they have that in their Instagram bios. And so there's the very far-flung network of micro-influencers that are associated with Turning Point USA, especially across Instagram. And the queen of the ambassadors, the queen of Turning Point USA's Instagram presence is definitely Alex Clark. She has had a career in radio and then came to Turning Point USA and hosts 2 podcasts. One is called Poplitics. The tagline is pop culture without the propaganda. And she also has a long form show that does interviews with people you've never heard of, a lot about mostly like health and wellness misinformation. Like, she's big on attacking IVF, on sort of pseudoscientific concerns about like the cleaners you're using in your home. Like, a lot of like lifestyle things are really big in sort of the Alex Clark universe. But she opened the conference and she gave this speech that was called The Top 4 Lies of Modern Feminism. And the top 4 lies of modern feminism are birth control, abortion, big fertility, and daycare. And again, this is a single childless millennial who it's unclear why she was standing in front of a bunch of teenage girls telling them not to use daycare, but she has this brain worm stuck in her head about how to raise a family and be a wife when it's just not a part of her life. And so she combines this right-wing reactionary politics with the sort of boilerplate lifestyle and home goods influence universe, and this really, frankly, she's a great media personality for the Instagram age. She's really compelling, and I think that may, that is very attractive to this crowd in particular. But yeah, she gave this like bizarre lecture that just came across as angry and judgmental about how to engage in healthcare and lifestyle supports that most women engage with. Like, I can't imagine that there were probably many, many women in that audience who use birth control. And here is Alex Clark on stage railing about how birth control, hormonal birth control in particular, is bad for you, that it actually can make you bisexual if you're not bisexual, that it can make you attracted to the different men because like your pheromones change. Like, it's just like, it's this whole world of this campaign she has against hormonal birth control. And how does that make you feel as someone in the audience? Like, that doesn't draw you in, that doesn't get you fired up. It's weird. It's just weird. And the whole experience, it went on for over 30 minutes, and it just felt, it was so strange. So yeah, Alex Clark is a unique person in the right-wing media, and I was very uncomfortable, just because of the tone. It was just strange. It was really bizarre behavior.
Now, you said she was a Turning Point USA ambassador. Now, I'm assuming, being that this seems to be like a thing, that there are multiple ambassadors. This is not like a paid position, right?
No, it's not a paid position. So she works for Turning Point USA.
Right, that's separate, right?
Yeah, so she has like a full, what I mean is that like what I'm trying to say is that one of the ways that Turning Point USA has built up its presence on Instagram has been through this ambassadorship
program.
Right,
so they have multiple people basically running their Instagram.
And so, you're just talking about normal girls who are involved in TPUSA and have 500 followers on Instagram, but they all follow Alex Clark. She is the Turning Point pop culture and lifestyle influencer. She, in her speech, said that she wanted to be, quote, the conservative movement's best friend. And so on her podcast, she talks about Taylor Swift, and she's a big Swiftie. So that's the first thing that comes to mind.
It's got to be hard for her to know that her hero is not on board with her politics.
She did a whole video about it. I can't say I watched it, but she's a big Swiftie. That I know for sure. And so she does a lot of that stuff, but then she intersperses it with like birth control is poisoning you, and like big fertility is preying on your anxieties about being a mother, and these sort of like health and wellness focused conspiracy theories that go along with the right-wing reactionary politics that Turning Point USA is known for.
Right. So, going off of the Instagram star Alex Clark, I also want to spend a little time talking about like the general aesthetic of this event. And I actually think like it's not just to be like, gossipy and like, oh, we're going to talk about the setting and the scenery and the artistic flip, but I think it's very telling how they view these young women, and it's all like these like I know that right before we went live, we were talking. You were telling me how like 2 years ago they did like a Barbie themed event. Last year they did an emo themed event, which I had said to you I very much wish I went to that one. And this year you said it was like a 70s thing. But even with that said, like these themes, it all just looks very like Barbie, like really like over the top, stereotypical, like girly girl gender reveal, like pink and these pastel colors. It's very bizarre in general, and then to let alone tie those colors to this conservative event. It's like what you're hearing on stage very much clashes with the artistic flair surrounding you.
Well, I love the idea of it as a gender reveal because I think that works on a number of levels. But yes, I mean, the production value of the event was extremely impressive. There was consistent branding across the entire space. Like you said, it was a 70s theme. The idea of the 70s theme being like, we're like smashing feminist myths from the 70s. And so there's a bunch of different appliques that you could take Instagram pictures in front of, and a lot of places to take Instagram pictures, and sort of like a groovy, like one of their t-shirts had a picture of a record on it, and it said like, we're going to set the record straight, as in like heterosexual. There was a graphic that went around that they used to promote the event prior to the event, and it was a high heel standing on a rainbow that said, "Don't tread on my femininity." So yeah, the graphics team at Turning Point USA is just top notch, and I wish I could say anything else, but the graphics is really, really impressive. And yeah, I mean, it was a whole universe. Like, I felt totally sucked in within like an hour of being there. Oh, there was a disco ball in the
of course.
there was
of course.
Great. Like, there was a disco ball in the conference room, or in the ballroom, that was doing its thing all weekend. I mean, it was great. That was great. So yeah, I mean, it was very, very well done, very well produced. It seemed, it must have cost a lot of money to put on, especially given the way that they're subsidizing the attendance. So it was very much about the aesthetic. And I think one thing that really stood out to me is what wasn't said that weekend. For example, on Friday, the biggest story in perhaps the history of any American post-presidency, the indictment of Donald Trump on these federal charges, which created a massive wave in the right-wing media universe more broadly, no mention. Lara Trump mentioned it very, very briefly in passing, just to say something like Donald Trump won't quit. She didn't really name it at all, but like, you wouldn't even get the sense that anyone knew that this thing had happened. And so like, these struggles that are happening within the Republican Party, in the court system, in Congress, et cetera, none of that was mentioned. Nothing about actual power struggles that are happening in this country. It was just grievance and 70s pastel aesthetic, and it was truly a surreal experience.
Now you have some swag that you took from got from the event. You want to show some of those? Because you were showing me some of them before the show, and it was,
yeah, totally.
Some of that was really like, there was one. You'll get to it, I'm sure. Let's take a look at this.
Yes, so I wasn't going to leave there without swag. I mean, I came all the way to Texas. So here's one of them from Turning Point Faith. Can you see it? It says liberty.
Yes. Liberty is God's. So, that's one thing I want to ask. Liberty is God's idea is what it says. So how, I mean, this is obviously a conservative event. Religion obviously is going to play a big role, but these also are, it's an event for young people. And I mean, again, young conservatives might feel differently, but from my general understanding, that young people, aren't as obviously, religious as older generations. So does religion play as big of a role at this Young Women's Leadership Summit as it does at other conservative events, or do they sort of not even really get too deep into it?
No, Turning Point has a massive faith initiative that they've started pretty recently, and they're networking it through churches all across the country. Their goal is to start Turning Point USA faith groups within churches. And Charlie Kirk has been touring, doing events with pastors, basically stepping into the shoes of Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, who, left us recently. The really picking up the mantle of televangelism and supercharging it for the digital age. So the Christian nationalism that is sort of in the zeitgeist right now is very, very much prevalent within the Turning Point universe. And they have this big faith initiative that's clearly very well funded. So definitely a big theme at YWLS. I heard
Right.
a lot of speakers.
Right. So what else we got? What other good stuff?
Okay, so here's another one. This says freed by Christ.
Move over to your there. That's perfect. Freed by Christ. Interesting. Okay.
So
I'm sure they all know how it's like to be in chains over at the Turning Point USA Young Women's Summit, like that button shows.
yeah. Yeah, so this is another these are these all Turning Point faith? This one, yeah, except for are they all Turning Point faith? Yeah, these are all Turning Point faith actually. So
This is one you showed me before.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is pretty dark. It says discipleship starts at home, and it has a picture of like a 1950s family, and he's reading from the Bible.
And move over to your right a little bit. Yeah, right there. And there's a little girl on sitting next to I guess the mother, and like it looks like she's being held down on the couch, being forced into like she doesn't want to be there. Quite, it doesn't look like she wants to be there.
It does look like she's being held down. So this one, I think this is the really, really dark one. That one really, oof. This one says, I'm not a biologist, but I know what a woman is. I think, yeah, but I know I'm a woman. I'm not a biologist, but I know I'm a woman, and it has
Okay.
two X chromosomes. So really, just like slop for the hogs.
Right.
So there's that one. This one I feel like could be like a copyright issue. It says Planned Parenthood, but they crossed it out, so it says Preventing Parenthood, which like fair enough.
Right. It also sounds like that's what they're advocating for. Like that's what like that's not really
Yeah.
yeah, that's bizarre. When
And
we've heard their speeches where they're trying to force these women into having kids.
and then this one has YWLS branding and Turning Point Faith, and it said God only made two genders, and it has like stained glass people on it. So pretty par for the course. And then I got
They
some.
really are obsessed with LGBT people, like right now, especially trans people, but obviously the broader LGBT community is always on their minds.
Yeah. I mean, I think this one's really disturbing. It says, teach your children to follow Christ or the world will teach them not to. And it has a picture of the transgender flag and like some like amalgamation of a child's face. I mean, this is really like perverted. It's really dark. Like, I don't know. That's not the TPUSA graphics team at their best.
Right. That is very weird.
And then here's a pretty common one. Feminism is toxic. And then the last piece of swag that I got was this like brochure that has all of the speakers in it. I got some literature on Turning Point Academy too. That's interesting. But this just has like all of the speakers. It's the program or whatever.
Right. With all the whole list of conservative women who built their careers and then still don't have kids or had kids after their career was already where it is, telling young women to not have a career and just have kids right away. Really great stuff.
So that's what I brought home with me from Texas.
Right. So what do you think like the point of this event is? Because like you said, it's not a moneymaker for them. They're busing these kids in from around the country. The tickets are highly subsidized. They clearly go all out with the event in terms of the scenery, the setting, the flair, how large it is. I mean, I saw some of these. The stages are incredible. The stage setup. I mean, I have my own guess, but I want to hear what your takeaway is after going.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is to recruit people to join Turning Point USA on their college campuses. That which, allows them to grow their membership numbers, which allows them to fundraise more. Like it's just a way to justify future fundraising. But I mean, it's a question I've been asking myself since I came home, and I'm not sure I've settled on a satisfactory answer, because if you build Turning Point USA, and clearly some of your most engaged members are young women, and, for example, the young woman who said that she wanted to be a surgeon, you can either you discourage her from following her dreams and pursuing a professional life. You would have had a Turning Point alumni that is like connected in the medical community and all of these things that come with being professional, that, is the exact type of thing you want your alumni to be. Or you have a woman who has been relegated to the home, but did Turning Point USA in college? What was the point of that? Like, what is Turning Point training these young women to do? I'm really not sure of the answer of that yet. But it seemed like this was the only thing they knew what to say to young women, was get married and have babies. But I'm curious what your take on it is.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a part of it, and I think that's really like the main reason, and that is, the conservative movement is obviously, and this is something I experienced myself attending, CPAC over the years, although it's been a while, but there was an absolute obsession with, at the time, millennials, because that was like the youngest generation when I last went to CPAC. And they were absolutely obsessed. Like every other like keynote speech was about getting young people to the event, or just involved in conservative politics. And I do think CPAC, which has a broader topic, broader list of topics, that they probably were focused on. There probably is a money-making angle, obviously, but also just getting young conservatives into the movement so that they win elections. They have a lot of politicians who come and speak at CPAC. You want to show those politicians that there's an audience for them. But with Turning Point USA, I think, especially with how this event is sort of created to almost be just for like the media that comes out afterwards, like it almost feels like this whole event is put together so that they could take all these photos of this, this hall at this hotel packed with young women, and they could take these photos and bring it around to their billionaire benefactors and their rich funders and say, look what we're doing here. This is like our pitch to you. And every year they do this to bring in more and more funding. I mean, just the fact that like what you're saying in terms of like is just based on these like very basic cultural war issues. You got guys like Benny Johnson recycling the same stuff year after year. Like what are they like doing other than just putting it together this event to take a few photo opportunities and go back around to their rich funders? Because it's not like these women are getting anything out of all coming together in Texas for this weekend and then just going back to college. Like there's no takeaway that they're not already hearing from conservatives every single day. This is regular conservative talking point for young women. Your career is to get married and have kids, stay at home, raise the kids, homeschool them, be subservient to your husband. I mean, that's the general gist every day they hear online from these people. So they don't really got to go to this event to hear it.
Right. Yeah. I think your point about it being about creating visual collateral to show funders, I think that that's a really good point. And I think that that really is the sense that I got there and just like well said. It's pretty shocking, the lack of a call to action really that there was at this event.
Right. And the fact that, and this might be because of whatever their government tax status is. I don't know what exactly they're listed as, but the fact that there is no sort of overlap with any sort of institutional sort of party machination in terms of like even like was there even any politicians speaking there? I don't think so. Like Laura Trump, I guess, is as close as you get. The daughter-in-law to the former president. Like
yeah. They had Lauren Boebert was there.
Okay.
Taylor Greene was there, and a congresswoman named Beth Van Dyne, I think her name was. I came in the middle of her speech, so I don't actually know any. I honestly had never heard of her before this event. But so there were a few. Turning Point USA is this 501c3, so they're prohibited from campaigning for candidates. They do have Turning Point Action, which is a 501c4, which does allow them to engage in partisan activism, and it is very much an active C4 for them. So that is a part of what Turning Point is for sure. But yeah, there was. Oh, this is what I was going to say is that Charlie Kirk on his show for ever since the fight they were having over the RNC chair in January, has been at war with the RNC. He says on a regular basis, don't donate to the RNC. So he's not involved in, so it's very much separate from the Republican Party in that way, at least. And so it really feels like Turning Point USA to a certain extent is having like an identity crisis within the context of this event.
Right. Very interesting. What did I don't know if you caught Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene, but that other Republican congresswoman you saw, what was her topic of her speech? Like, I'm really interested to hear what a sitting congressperson would tailor their speech on at this event when you've already run through how the theme from every other speaker was basically stay home, have kids, serve your husband.
I didn't see Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert, and honestly, by the time I came in halfway through that Congresswoman's speech, I really do think my brain was leaking out of my ears. So I can't say that I know exactly what was being said at the time, but I don't think it was. I think it was probably a little bit, if I recall correctly, and I don't really remember specifics, I do not recall her pushing this radical message about marriage. Like, it was probably a more boilerplate Republican stump speech. But I wish I could remember more about it.
Yeah, it would probably make for some if she went the direction of all the other speakers, probably make for some good ads for her opponent in the coming election season. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Madeline Peltz, this was great. Thank you so much. It was. I'm so glad you went because I had so much fun vicariously through you and talking about this. Where can people find you online? Feel free to drop any social media handles, links, and if you have anything coming up that you want to talk about in terms of upcoming stories, please feel free. The floor is yours.
So you can read my work at MediaMatters.org. I'm writing there, and you can also follow my tweets at Peltz Madeline on Twitter.
Sounds good. All right, Madeline Peltz, everyone. Media Matters for the Deputy Director of Rapid Response at Media Matters for America. An absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Have a great night.
Thank you. Same to you.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, folks, let's go to the second half of the show. That was, that was, I read Madeline's piece, when I first saw it. I think it came out yesterday, Monday, June 12th. And I was, the event was this past weekend. And I was very interested. Like, it wasn't that we never heard these talking points from right-wingers before, but just like the combination of it being like the focus, the LGBT obsession combined with the grown adult rich women telling young kids to settle down and get married and have kids, combined with like the aesthetics of it, was just fascinating to me. And I'm so glad we got to talk about it. We are now going to go to the second half of the show where I'm going to take your calls. But before we do that, give me a quick minute to do some promos because, folks, it's June. We're halfway through June, and at the beginning of this month, we had a few people have to drop out due to financial difficulties or, various different reasons. Had a few card declines due to issues with Patreon. So if you would like to, I should say, and can, become a paying monthly subscriber of the show and help the show grow, consider going to patreon.com/MattBinder and signing up to become exactly what I said, monthly paying subscriber. Without the patrons, this show truly wouldn't be possible. None of my shows would be possible without my patrons. You help me be able to cover the costs of running this show and put money aside for various upgrades and things I need to better run this show. And I would like to give a quick shout out to the people who become patrons over the past week. Sebastian D, Chargund, Arya, Nam, and T. Wickens. Thank you all so much for becoming patrons. And again, patreon.com/MattBinder if you can. You can also support this show by subscribing at youtube.com/MattBinder. And if you're watching the live stream, drop a super chat. I read all the super chats in the second half of the show. So if you have a question to ask me via super chat, I will 100% get to it. You could also support this show by following me on Twitch at twitch.tv/MattBinder. And if you are an Amazon Prime subscriber, connect your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, and you get a free Twitch Prime subscription every month. That's a paid subscription for me at no extra cost to you. It just comes, just by paying for Amazon Prime every month, you get a free Twitch Prime subscription that gets your favorite Twitch creator paid every month. You just got to actually just make sure you give it to them. So be sure to do that at twitch.tv/MattBinder, and it doesn't automatically renew the Twitch Prime subscriptions. You got to manually give it to your favorite creator every month. So doomedcast.com for the podcast version of this show. The latest episode of Scam Economy just came out. Check it out at scameconomy.com. You can also catch the video version of the episode at the YouTube channel. What else? Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Blue Sky. And I just got on a new one, T2 Social. Just search Matt Binder. Excuse me. You'll find me. What else? I think that's it. Let's go to the second half of the show. You can call into the show by opening up Skype and searching Doomed Live. Doomed Live, exactly how those two words sound and are spelt, but just no space in between. Doomed Live, as if it's one word. Search for that. This will, the call-in number, username will show up, and just call right in. I take the calls as they come in. There's no screening, so if you want to call in to debate me, if you're a young woman who attended the Turning Point USA event and wanted to defend Charlie Kirk's honor, you can call in and do that, and I'll have no idea that's what you're going to call in to talk about. You'll get me good. So yeah, call in, take calls from everybody. And here we go. Give me a quick second to refill my drink, because as you could hear, I'm choking here. And after that short break, I'll be back on the stream. And if you are a free podcast listener, if you just listen to the free audio only podcast version of the show, this is where I say goodbye to you. Everyone else, you can stay, but the free audio podcast version listeners of the show, this is where you go. And I will see you all next time on Doomed.
Ecological collapse, corporate fascism, corporate journalism, police brutality. voter suppression, austerity economics, educate the masses, rampant homophobia,
We got our first caller. Hey, what's your name? Where you calling from?
What's up, Matt?
Hey,
You from Jamaica?
Dave from Jamaica. How are you doing, my friend? What are we going to talk about today?
I don't think you are exactly what you claim you are. I would say you're a conservative. What makes you a liberal? I'm pro-Green New Deal. Are you? Yes, really? Absolutely. No, I have watched the show. I've seen you completely come out and get really mad at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for some of the things in the Green New Deal.
All right, we are back on the show. Welcome to the second half where I take your calls. I am pulling myself back up on the feed, and the phone lines are open. And some people already tried calling in. Let's do this. Yeah, I just yes, Dan. Feel free to call in. Let me take this first caller here. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from? And they just hung up. Let's go back to the phones. And everyone just hung up. Ooh, this is the opportunity here. This is your chance to get in. And very, very few times there's a complete empty lull here. And here we go. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from? First caller here. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Dan from California.
Hey, Dan, just turn the stream down, like the YouTube stream or the Twitch stream, wherever you're listening, and just listen through Skype. I see you're using a video. Can I pull your video on the feed?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Give me 1 second. And all right, here we go. Hey, Dan from California. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I am a big Ayn Rand fan. So I assume that we have pretty different views on a lot of things. And I was interested to, So I was interested to debate or discuss that.
Cool. Let's. What is there a specific topic in general you want to discuss? I think that's probably the best way to go about this. Pick something in particular that, and we could just talk about that.
Okay. Well, I can just say very briefly, just a quick nutshell of her philosophy. She's pro-reason, so that sets her apart from conservatives in their religious kind of approach. She's pro-egoism and pro-individualism, so I think that sets her apart from both the left and the right. I think there's a lot of collectivism on both sides. And then also she's pro-capitalism, so that again makes her pretty distinctive in the landscape of political views. So if there's anything on that menu that piques your interest, I'd be happy to talk about it.
I mean, generally, like I feel like she actually fits a lot of like that description fits a lot of conservatives nowadays, where they espouse this sort of self-sustaining, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. The responsibility is all yours, but then, of course, you find out that they themselves are sucking on the government teat, so to say, and are getting help, but just refuse to admit that they are, because I guess it's different when they do, such as Ayn Rand, who lived her final days on, taking Social Security, which nothing wrong with that. That's perfect. That's what it's there for.
Well, I have a video on my YouTube channel exactly about that. So Ayn Rand, she's often criticized and I would say smeared for taking Social Security, but the way she thought of it is she's just getting money back that was stolen from her. So that money was hers by rights. The government did not have a right to take that away from her. So it's just getting her money back. It's not living off of someone else's dime. It's getting her own dime back. So I don't think there's any problem with that.
Now, I mean, did she I mean, she
She
knew
wrote
that
an
the
article
money.
on that too, by the way. She has an article discussing this issue.
I mean, she knows that the money wasn't. She knew that the money that she had put into Social Security wasn't just sitting there waiting for her, and also she probably didn't get out exactly what she put in. I'm assuming.
I don't know how much she put in, but
Right.
she died wealthy. She left, I think, like $500,000 to her heir. So the idea that she died broke and on welfare is it's just a myth. It's ridiculous, and it's used to smear her. So I think that needs to be made very clear. But I think the important thing here is the government has no right to take this money away from any individual. No one should be forced to sacrifice for other people. That's an essential part of her philosophy. And so there's nothing inconsistent or hypocritical about what she did.
I mean, she did rail against any redistribution of wealth whatsoever, and I mean that's basically. I mean, to say like I put my money in, I mean that's taxes. Every redistribution of wealth that as we know it is practically the citizens put their pay taxes and the money is distributed via various different programs or infrastructure or whatever. I mean, it seems like a way to explain away that she took Social Security.
Well, she's born into this system. It wasn't up to her that well, she wasn't born in it. She actually immigrated from Russia, which went communist when she was living there. She was 12 years old, I think, when the Bolshevik Revolution happened in 1917, and the communists, I believe, they took over her father's pharmacy, which is what they had used, and then they were reduced to poverty, and her life was miserable under the communists. And then she escaped to America in 1926, and then shortly after that, the New Deal started, and America started implementing policies that were similar to what she had fled from. But she came to a system, and she didn't. It was more free market back in those days, but it became less free market with the rise of the New Deal, and then later the Great Society under Lyndon Johnson. The growth of governments, the government grew massively after she came here. But she doesn't believe in majority rules, unlimited majority rules, where you can just get a mob together and vote away the rights of minorities. She thinks people have individual rights, and no one should be able to vote away anyone else's property or wealth.
Well, just before we get too far from this, I want to make sure I don't exactly think the New Deal is anywhere near the USSR. So I don't think
it's not that bad. But it's a step on the way there.
I don't know about bad, but she didn't come exactly. I don't think it's a step either. But let's actually talk about a specific. Because I don't really want to. Go back and forth on Ayn Rand, because the point of Ayn, to bring up Ayn Rand is her beliefs, and I prefer to do that. And I assume your beliefs too, being that you're a fan of hers. I prefer to talk about current policy instead of just talking about Ayn Rand's day, because I think that's more important. So is there a specific policy or program or issue you want to bring up, and we could just focus on that for this discussion in terms of something you disagree with or don't think should be or wish that something was? Throw something out there.
Okay. Well, I wish we were a laissez-faire capitalist society. So that would mean no taxes at all, which means, because they're coercive. I mean, that follows from the basic principles of her philosophy. She thinks people should deal with each other on a voluntary basis. So I shouldn't be forced to give my money to someone else. If I want to voluntarily help somebody, if I want to help pay for somebody's education or healthcare, if I'm their relative, maybe they're a close friend and I want to help them out, I should be able to choose to use my money in that way. But I don't think I should be forced to help other people. And I shouldn't be, threatened with jail if I don't choose to do that with money. So taxes, that's one issue we could talk about.
So you would just do zero taxes, no taxes at all.
Right. I think the government should exist, but it should be funded by voluntary means, not coercive means. I think it's important to have a government, but it should be funded by voluntary means and restricted much more than it is today. Today, it's doing all kinds of things that I don't think it's the proper role of government to be doing.
All right, so we know that the very wealthy in this country who hoard massive amounts of wealth, that they do everything possible to pay as little in taxes as possible as they can. So what if under this voluntary system, the richest in this country, the 1%, let's say, decide that they're just not going to pay taxes at all, and so you have this massive hoarding of wealth. And they obviously just going to continue to get richer, and they're not contributing anything whatsoever. How would we fund anything? How would that work?
Well, I don't think it's in people's self-interest to fund nothing. I mean, it's in rich people's interests. It's in poor people's interests to have a peaceful, safe society. You don't want criminals running around robbing, raping, murdering people. So it's in everybody's, at least every rational person's self-interest, to support a government, to have a police force, to have an army to protect you from foreign invaders, to have a court system to peacefully settle disputes. If you didn't have those institutions of government, things would just perhaps reduce to anarchy, and that would be horrible. So I think it's in people's rational self-interest to support these functions of government.
But
so they should
you're really depending on people to do this out of the kindness of their hearts, and we've already seen, like, let's take I don't think rich people would honestly pay in taxes voluntarily, because we know that when COVID happened, a number of them just got the fuck out of Dodge and got on their big yacht and lived their lives in the middle of the water. We know that very rich people are buying up land in New Zealand, for example, and other far away places, and basically just building themselves little fortresses in case shit did go down. Like, they obviously don't care. Like, they've already laid out the opportunity. They've already laid it out that when the opportunity presents itself, they're out of here. They're not gonna they're not sticking it out and fighting for everybody. They're gone, and that's with them paying taxes. Now imagine if they didn't have to, they'd be gone.
Well, I think if people had the opportunity to choose what to do with their money, they would be more benevolent with it. Like, if I'm a rich person, I might not give any money to charity because half of my income is already being forcibly taken away from me. But if I have that 50% of my income, or however much to choose what to do with, then I would more likely help people out of benevolence. And I think people did this to a certain extent. There were mutual aid societies in the 19th century before the welfare state grew as large as it is today. I mean, America has a long history. It's not like, and it became super prosperous. You had millions of immigrants from around the world fleeing to America because of its freedom and its opportunities. This is before there was a massive welfare state. So I don't think people are going to be without any means to survive without taxes.
Why do you think the welfare state it was created? Like, why do you think these government welfare programs were created? Like, why do you think FDR instituted the New Deal? Like, why do you think these things were they deemed necessary?
Yeah, I think America has, the intellectuals in particular, have been very heavily influenced by European philosophy, going back to Kant and Hegel and Marx. That was the vanguard in the philosophy world. And a lot of American intellectuals were influenced by those ideas. Bismarck, I think, he introduced the welfare state in Germany, and it spread to other parts of Europe, I believe, and eventually to America. But I don't think it was out of necessity. I think it was out of their philosophical preconvictions that this was an appropriate sort of society to invent.
Wait,
but
so
America had been.
You think everything was going great? Rich people were just passing their money around to anyone who needed help. And then all of a sudden, just because of ideological reasons, FDR and various other world leaders decided to institute these welfare programs when everything was just hunky-dory. There was no necessity for it whatsoever during those time periods.
No, I don't think there was any necessity. And as I mentioned before, there was millions of immigrants coming here. I mean, if this were such a horrible place and people are dying in the streets because they can't support themselves, why would so many people from around the earth be flocking to the United States to live here if it was such a horrible place? They were escaping worse places where they had less freedom and less opportunity. And America had explosive growth. They had tremendous progress in the 19th century. And that's a period that's often smeared. We hear people like Rockefeller called the robber barons. But I think there's a lot of mythology that people are taught about that era. And if they were taught different facts about those eras, they have a much different evaluation.
I mean, there was a lot of death, and a lot of homelessness, and a lot of people on the streets before programs like the New Deal were instituted. Like we're talking about like the era of the Great Depression. A lot of
No,
people.
Great Depression is much later. That's a 20th century phenomenon after the caused by government intervention in effect. That's another one of these myths. It's often attributed to free market capitalism.
Well, I'm talking about the New Deal. The New Deal.
Yeah.
That did not happen later.
Yeah, that was 20th century, 1930s. FDR. This is after they instituted an income tax, after they created the Federal Reserve, which could print all this fiat currency, manipulate the market rates. When they had a freer system, there were some panics and runs on banks in the 19th century, but not to the extent of a Great Depression. And even those panics in the 19th century were caused by lack of free banking. If you read some free market historians or economists on this, you can learn about how systems like in Scotland or Canada, where they had actually a freer system economically and in the banking industry, they didn't have these panics that periodically happened in the United States. But even with those, things were still so good that millions of immigrants would come here. So, and if you look at a graph, like in terms of life expectancy, it's like a hockey stick. In the 1800s, this is when, like after the Industrial Revolution, life expectancy skyrockets, standard of living skyrockets. So there was a correlation between prosperity and freedom. So I think it's the exact opposite of the picture that people often portray, which is this is a time of despair and everything is going terrible. Actually, it was a time of huge progress, which is why it was such a magnet to people all around the world.
So what are your feelings on? So you think there should be a government, but it should be all run voluntarily. Right. So what do you think the government's role is other than military? Is that basically it?
So the basic role of the government is to protect people from force, and that's it. So that's why it has a police system. That's another thing. So to protect people from domestic criminals who would use force, like robbers or rapists or murderers. And then in addition to the police, for domestic criminals and domestic force, you have an army or a military to protect people from foreign invaders who would come here and conquer us or enslave us. And then the third basic function, in addition to police and military, is the court system, which is to settle disputes among people, even peaceful citizens living in the same country, in order, if they have a dispute about something, instead of settling it by resorting to fisticuffs, the courts allow a peaceful mechanism to resolve their disputes, so they don't have to resort to force. And those are basically the only three functions of government. It's to extract force from society. But everything beyond that, like forcibly taking people's money, taking Peter's money and giving it to Paul, making Peter pay for Paul's education or healthcare or whatever, all that's illegitimate. That's bringing force back in to society, whereas the proper purpose of government, on Rand's view, is to extract force and allow people to have peaceful, voluntary associations.
Okay, so basically you just think like, it should be a police force, military, things like that. So what about like labor laws? You don't think those should exist?
Right, like minimum wage, for instance, whatever price of labor you want, that should be a voluntary agreement between an employer and employee. The government has no business as a third party interfering with the voluntary arrangements of employer and employee. What
about child labor?
That's something that parents should have a role in, because if a parent, this is actually something that was necessary back in the early days. It's actually a luxury today that we don't have to have our kids labor, but it was a survival necessity prior to the Industrial Revolution. But since then, we've become so wealthy that it hasn't been necessary for parents to have their children work. But if a kid wants to walk a dog for money or something, or rake leaves or mow lawns or sell lemonade at a lemonade stand, they should be able to do that. And
kids can do that today. We're talking about kids, not being able to work in the mines, the coal mines, and in like slaughterhouses and stuff. Like, that's what we're talking about when we talk about child labor laws, not some kid setting up a lemonade stand.
Yeah, there's a book called Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal by Ayn Rand, where there's a section on child labor. And it's discussed in there, like there were children who were chimney sweeps And I think there might have been some government intervention involved in the child labor that there was. Um, I mean, as opposed to free market causing it. I don't remember exactly everything it says in the essay about that, but some of the jobs were like in a factory. They would have the children tie knots like on a loom or something if a thread breaks. Pretty trivial labor. But I mean, these types of jobs, I mean, they're not awesome, but what are you going to compare it to? I mean, are we comparing it to a pre-industrial society where you have to do back-breaking labor from, dawn to dusk? Or are we talking about a, advanced 21st century? I don't think we can apply the standards today and then say, well, it's terrible that people should ever have to do that at any point in history.
But I'm not trying to apply the standards of today to. I'm not comparing. Like, I'm talking about, like, this is your views in terms of what you would like to see today. So I'm not like that's why I wanted to talk about things like this. Like, it's I guess it could be fun talking about Ayn Rand specifically and the era she lived in the past. But for me, it's more practical in terms of talking about, you said you don't think today we should have taxes. And you tell me also you don't think that there should be labor laws and child labor laws included today. And to me, that's not like looking back at the past. We're talking about modern day. I think, when you say that we today have the luxury of not having to have children in the coal mines, I mean, that quote unquote luxury comes from things like welfare programs and the state.
I don't think so.
I mean, you don't think that has anything to do with it? You don't think the fact that
No.
Ma and Pa doesn't have to send little Junior to the factory instead of like, letting them get educated because there's no programs to help save them and put food on the table if they're in dire straits? You don't think there's no correlation there?
I don't think it's thanks to government that child labor has been eradicated, or at least some forms of it have been eradicated. And this is something that's discussed in that book I mentioned. It's after that free markets have evolved to a certain extent that's to the extent that child labor is no longer necessary, that it was then legislated, at least in some places, and made illegal to have children work in certain places. Also, like I've heard this is true of like the I don't know if it's the 40-hour work week or the 8-hour day. Or the certain wages paying, like Henry Ford, he had he doubled the wages of the people that worked for him at a certain point. And it was after that there were wage laws instituted, but it's only after the free market can support a certain level that the government then comes down and mandates that. But I don't think it's from the government from the get-go that it's not thanks to the government that it came to be in the first place, that we got to a certain standard of living or got to the point where we didn't need child labor. That was after the fact.
Well, some of these things aren't like the government doing it from the goodness of their heart from the get-go. A lot of these things were due to people getting together and, putting political force on the government to get these things done. For example, a lot of labor laws are thanks to unions. What are your feelings on unions?
I think unions are fine as long as they're voluntary. So the problem is when they use government coercion to get their way or to force a company to the bargaining table. That's what I think is wrong. So I think if you start a business, you're the owner of this business. It's your right to run the business as you choose. And if you don't want to have a union, you don't want to deal with the union's demands, you don't want to bargain with the union, well, I think because it's your property, it's your business, you shouldn't be forced by the government to bargain or negotiate with the union. If you want to allow a union, maybe you think it's in your self-interest to have a union, maybe you think your employees will be happier that way, you'll have better employee retention, then you can have a union. So I just think it should be up to the free decision of the people involved. It shouldn't be the government stepping in and coercing people.
You could have misspoke, so I want to make it clear, though. I know you mentioned the government. You don't believe the government should get involved with unionization and labor when it comes to that. But I also caught you saying that you don't think a company or a business owner should feel like they need to go to a bargaining table with a union. Now, if the government's not involved and the workforce unionizes voluntarily, you're fine though with a company having no choice but to sit at a bargaining table with its workers.
Well, I'm not sure I follow the example, because if you say the union organizes voluntarily, well, they can do that, but if that's against the rules of the company's owner, then they can't do that. I mean, at that point, the company can fire the people who try to organize voluntarily. Like if it's in their contract that they're not allowed to form a union, then they try to form a union, then at that point they can be fired. And the government shouldn't stop the company, because that would be the government interfering forcibly with the company and violating the property rights of the company owner.
All right. So, okay. So, all right. Let's talk about. All right. I got to bring this one up because you mentioned the child labor laws. Where do you land on age of consent?
Age of consent. Okay, so I mean, I think there's a distinction between adults and children, and which country draws where countries draw that line might vary. In some countries, in the United States, it's 18. In other countries, it might be a little higher, a little bit lower. But there's obviously a distinction between children and adults, and I don't think children can be, wherever we do to draw the line for legal purposes.
Who makes that
people
distinction?
below that line shouldn't have to. I mean, they can't give consents. You have to be an adult to give consents.
Right, but who makes that distinction though? Where is the line? Who draws the line? Who makes that distinction in a world where everything's voluntary and the government's only there to protect people's property and safety?
Well, there's a legislature, which is elected. I think that would be, and I didn't mention them before, in addition to like the police, military, and court system. But there's also some other things the government does, like have a legislature. They have to create the laws. And I guess maybe this is an example of one thing that a legislature would do, which is elected by the people. They would come up with some age of consent. And at this point, you're deemed an adult, and at that point, you're legally responsible. You're no longer considered under the guardianship of somebody else. And, they would need to come up with something reasonable. And if they don't, then if a country becomes so corrupt as the founding fathers deemed Britain to be, then you can overthrow the government. You can have a revolution like the Americans did in the American Revolution. So if someone tries to set up an age of consent of like 5 years old, that's ridiculous. And then I would try to overthrow that government. But I don't think that's really going to be a problem. I think, people will just get together, choose a reasonable age.
I personally do think, obviously the example of age of consent being 5 is ridiculous, because 5-year-olds are children, and they cannot consent. But I mean, in your scenario, it sounds like in this libertarian paradise, the government
not libertarian, not libertarian, objectivist. I distinguish that from libertarian. Ayn Rand called her philosophy objectivism, so she was very keen to distinguish herself from the libertarians.
What is the difference between objectionists and libertarians? Can you explain the difference between those two? Objectivists and libertarians.
Yeah. So one key difference, by the way, this is Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff, her most famous students. So one key difference is objectivism is an entire philosophy. So it's not just a political philosophy. There's a metaphysics, a view about the basic nature of reality. There's an epistemology, a view about the nature of knowledge. There's an ethical system, rational egoism. And then on top of that entire philosophical foundation, there's a political philosophy of laissez-faire capitalism, individual rights. And that's the point where libertarianism comes in, or people who call themselves libertarians, but they don't have the entire foundation. And some of them are anarchists. I think many of them are anarchists, and they don't really understand what true liberty is. And they actually, on these issues like consent, they think it's a violation. Some of them think it is a violation of liberty or freedom if you say you're not allowed to have sex with a child. They think that's a violation of liberty. I think that's a distorted understanding of what liberty is. So that's this kind of example is one reason I like to distinguish libertarianism from the philosophy I subscribe to, objectivism, or at least in large part. So so it's not anarchists, and it's an entire system of philosophy. Objectivism is. Those are the two key distinctions I would draw between objectivism and libertarianism.
All right. Where do you land on basic, regulations? Let's throw this one out here because this is a famous clip that always makes its way around from one of the Libertarian Party conventions. In the objectivist world, in the objectivist nation, are there seatbelt laws, for example?
No. So there would be private roads, first of all, and if you're the road owner or part of a consortium of people who own the roads, you would set the rules for the road, and maybe you would require seatbelts on your road if you're a given owner. Maybe there's a different owner who doesn't. Maybe that's, most would find it in their self-interest to have seatbelt rules on their own roads to minimize accidents and damages. But it wouldn't be a government matter. It would be a private matter.
So you think that all roads should be private?
Yeah.
There should be no interstate highways, things connecting various states for if even for the laissez-faire capitalism economy. Like, you don't think there's any sort of general benefit in having a government that makes sure that interstate commerce can happen, that for example, a truck driver can deliver goods from a company in California to consumers in Iowa?
I mean, it's certainly a value to have roads like that, but I think for that very reason, there would be a profit incentive. There would be an incentive for venture capitalists, industrialists to construct such roads and get a return on their investment. I mean, there were private railroads back in the 19th century that competed with government railroads and actually did it much more efficiently and better. I think J.J. Hill, who ran the railroad up in the Pacific Northwest, is a good example of this. He didn't get subsidies like many of the other railroad companies, and so it's not necessary to have governments intervene to have large infrastructure. You just need the profit motive.
Well, so what if in this world, it seems like it would be very difficult to be a small business owner, which seems to be sort of also like the lifeblood of this objectivist view, right? I mean, Walmart, for example, they own all the privatized roads, and you run a competing business, and they just choose to not let you drive on their roads, and you have no way to basically do anything, and then you get monopolies. No?
I don't think there's going to be one company. I don't know how it would evolve, but at least a priori, I don't have reason to think that there's going to be one company like Walmart who owns all the roads and for some crazy reason doesn't want to let anyone drive on it or only wants to let a select few.
I mean, would you say we have a lot of regulation in this country today? Like, we have big government?
Yeah, I would say so.
And with all of this regulation and big government, there are a lot of there are very few big companies, I should say. Very few big companies, a elite class of mega corporations that basically run various industries. And that's with all this regulation, with all these antitrust laws. You don't think of, even without those regulations, seeing what happens with regulation, you don't think without these regulations, without these antitrust laws, it would be even worse?
I think it would be better without antitrust laws. I think antitrust laws, they stifle innovation. I mean, they put businessmen in this position where you can get, they're non-objective laws. There's a passage I could look up if there's a great quote from Ayn Rand, but it's something to the effect of, if you set your prices the same as your competitors, you can get be penalized for collusion. If you set your prices below your competitors, you can be penalized for I don't know what the term she uses, for trying to undercut, and I don't know what term it is.
I'm not sure
but
exactly
if you set
the
it above,
examples.
you can also be penalized. So no matter what price you set your good at in relation to your consumers, you can be criminalized. So the laws, the antitrust laws, are completely arbitrary and non-objective. There's no way to follow them, and it leads to paralysis. You have to ignore them, or what I think sometimes happens is you have to lobby the government. So when you have these regulatory laws, it creates an incentive to have a lobby agency in Washington. Whereas if you didn't have these, if the government didn't have the power, this arbitrary power over companies, you wouldn't need lobbyists over the government. So I think it stifles innovation and makes businessmen incapable or less capable of innovating. But even with all the regulations, we've still had huge companies like Amazon or Google become massive players in the market. But I think they've done tremendous good. I think people like Jeff Bezos, they've become super rich. But I think the reason is because they've created some awesome products that millions or billions of people benefit from. So we voluntarily give them our money. We subscribe to Prime or whatever. We use their services, and then they benefit as a result. So it's a win-win kind of relation.
Well, you also know that Amazon takes advantage of the, for example, the wonderful service that the U.S. postal system offers. A lot of Amazon deliveries, regardless of whether it's Amazon delivering it or FedEx or whomever, for certain areas, they actually hand it off to the United States Postal Service to finish the delivery because it's more efficient and convenient and cost-saving for them to do so.
Now, USPS, that's a monopoly. That's a bad kind of monopoly, I would say, because that's a government coercive monopoly. So FedEx and UPS are not free to compete with USPS when it comes to certain kind of parcels of mail.
What do you feel about? How do you feel about the U.S. Constitution?
I think it's a great document, but it's not perfect. I think it has flaws in it. Of course, slavery was allowed from the beginning. I think that was a huge flaw. Fortunately, it was eradicated. Also, the power to tax, I think, is a flaw. So it's not a perfect document, but compared to what existed in any previous country, I think it was a huge step forward. And it's the intellectual foundation that allowed America to prosper as much as it has, and is to become super wealthy, the wealthiest country in history. I would say the greatest country in history in terms of its respect for individual rights, which, as I mentioned before, I think is what has attracted so many people to America. Unfortunately, I think we're much less open in terms of immigration than we used to be. It's so hard now for people to immigrate. I think it often takes years. People who aren't criminals.
Wait, I think we might. Hold on. I brought up the Constitution thing because I wanted to bring up how the Postal Service is actually explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, and it's actually a completely self-funded service. It doesn't get any government money. It completely runs on the service that it provides, the payment it receives for the service it provides from the people who use it. But you brought up the immigration thing, and I think we might be coming across something that we agree upon. So you think it is too hard to immigrate to this country, and you think we should let more immigrants into the United States?
Yeah, I don't think that there should be any barrier to entry for people who are not posing any kind of physical threat. So if they're not a criminal, they're not a terrorist, they're not carrying some kind of deadly disease with them, then they should be allowed in. There's people in this country have no rights. I mean, the country as a whole is not private property. If you're on the border, if you have a property right on the border, then you can keep people off your parcel of land. But the country as a whole is not private property. And I don't think any individual in this country has a right to keep others out, and so that they don't have to compete with cheaper labor coming in. If people from Mexico or wherever want to pick apples for a cheaper price, and I want to hire them, let's say I'm in America and I want to hire some of this cheap labor, I should be free to do so, and they should be free to come in. And to interfere with that voluntary relationship is to violate the rights both of me as an American and of the person who would come here and work.
As someone who's pro-immigration and as someone who sees the benefits in having immigrants come here, and immigrants are usually very hard working, more hardworking than Americans. I'll tell you that. Do you think that in order to create a situation that allows everything you just mentioned that you're for to happen, that the U.S. government should provide services to help immigrants, especially those who are seeking a sanctuary here from, a brutal, maybe a country they're escaping? Do you believe the government should step in and provide some sort of even temporary aid to immigrants?
No, I don't think aid. I think that's the role of private charity. So if you, as a private citizen, wants to help out some of these immigrants, or if I do, then we should be free to use our money to help these people out. But what we shouldn't be doing is being forced by the government to help out anyone else, whether it's someone in America. So I think we should get rid of welfare for Americans, but we should also not have welfare for foreign immigrants who come in. And I think that's one of the reasons conservatives are opposed to immigration. They make up this excuse. They say, like, well, if you have these immigrants coming in, they're going to be sucking off the government teat, and we can't afford that. Well, I don't think Americans should be sucking off the government teat. No one should be able to rely on forcible, coercive means to support themselves. But as private citizens, we should all be free to help out these people.
So who is this immigrant, though, who simultaneously needs to come to the U.S., but they can afford to move themselves and all their belongings and their entire family to the U.S.? They can afford to do that, but they also, once they get here, have to, pick apples for $1 an hour. Like, who is this immigrant who could afford the immigration, but then has to work these slave wage, below minimum wage jobs? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, do you see? Like, it is. Like, you don't see the hypocrisy there that, that who is this person that can afford to do this, but also needs to work for this menial income? Like, I don't see it. I don't see it. Like, the people who come to this country now, like in reality, and have to do these low paying jobs, it's because they come here and they're usually provided with housing and some sort of bare minimum living standard, just so they can exist.
I don't think it's necessary. No, I don't think it's necessary. And I think the 19th century showed this. I mean, we didn't have government programs to help out immigrants coming from Europe in the 19th century, yet we had millions of them coming here. I think that's the same thing with Mexicans coming today. They don't need the government to help. All they need is freedom and opportunity. I think that's what they want most deeply. And, these people want it so bad. I've heard they swim through shark-infested waters, maybe coming from communist Cuba, to try to get to the United States. They risk their lives. Sometimes they lose their lives, very tragically. So, no, you don't need the government to prop them up. You just need the government to get out of their way, let them in, and then protect the rule of law once they get here. And I think private charity, if they will be abundantly available to help them out, especially if you're not, taking away so much of people's wealth through taxation. It's not being siphoned away for these other causes. You can use it to help out people who are immigrating, perhaps, or for whatever other uses you want to put to it. But no, I don't. I have more confidence in immigrants. I don't think they need handouts from the government in order to survive. I think they just need working opportunities, and I think they are willing to do that.
I mean, I just don't see, like, you don't think there's even a transition phase? Like, I'm just trying to understand.
They can set that up. They move one family member over there, and they can get on his feet, and then move another family member. It can happen gradually. They might rely on friends to help them out. But I think all this can be done by private means. And it's immoral, I think, and counterproductive to set up a system of coercion to try to get these people on their feet. I think that's violating a principle that it sets a bad precedent, and there's not really a principled way to stop it. Once you introduce some coercion, there's no ground. Like income tax, it used to be very low. It was a scandal when the income tax was first introduced, at just a few percent. And now, decades later, where everyone or most people are paying like over 20 or 30%. So these things are. It might seem crazy to you now. If you look back in history, the way things used to be, it seems much more reasonable and doable and realistic.
Right. I mean, wasn't the top income tax rate in this country something like above 90%, and it was during late 40s, 50s, and 60s where people look fondly back on as the peak of the American middle class. No.
There was a period, I don't know how long it lasted, but yeah, I've heard there was a period where the top income bracket was taxed at over 90% or over that. But no, I don't see that as a golden era. I think productivity, I think the rate of progress and increase in productivity, I think it's slowed down over the course of the 20th century. I think we had explosive growth in the 19th century, all kinds of innovation, the airplane, the car, the electronics. And there's been some innovation since then. Of course, the technology we're using right now to have this conversation, the internet's, YouTube, but this is in the sector that's been, I think, one of the least regulated sectors, the tech sector. And I don't want it to be regulated because I think that'll slow down its progress. It'll make it lag in the way that I think other sectors of the economy have lagged. I think that there's been much less progress in the medical healthcare field, which I think is tremendously regulated. But I think we would have much more progress there. In some cases, we have actually gone backwards. Like we used to have supersonic travel, the Concorde airline back in the 80s or 90s. We had that for a brief time, then it went out of off the market, and we don't have supersonic travel now. Someone's trying to bring it back. There's a company called Boom, which is creating a supersonic flight again, and maybe in like 10 years they'll actually it'll be on the market again. But in some ways we've retrogressed. We haven't merely stagnated, we've gone backwards. But I think if we got rid of all the regulations and we had a truly free market, we would rocket forward in terms of our progress.
You mentioned health medicine, and you keep bringing up the 19th century as like it seems like you think the 19th century was like the peak era in terms of at least your ideological beliefs. Wasn't there also simultaneously a lot of disease and during the 19th century? Like, wasn't that the age of pandemics and various different contagious diseases running rampant through the streets of this country?
Well, I think there was some of that, but there was also cures to that. Like Louis Pasteur, he had discovered, that I don't know what all the details of it. Was it some kind of penicillin, or I don't know what it was, but some of the diseases that have been scourges of humanity for centuries were finally eradicated due to the science that was developed in the 19th century. And we got vaccines like the polio vaccine later on, malaria, and DDT, pesticides to spray on plants to, I think that was to eradicate malaria. And we had basically eradicated, but I think it's come back. I think, unfortunately, it's starting to come back in some places because of the environmentalist movement, which I think is an anti-progress, anti-industrial sort of movement based on false science. I think there's a lot of pseudoscience behind the environmentalist movement. This comes up with the whole climate change issue and global warming and all that. Here I have a great reference for you or your audience, Alex Epstein. I think he's done great work in the area of energy and climates, environmental issues. I think there's been a lot of pseudoscience which has held back progress, and I think we'd be much further forward. So yeah, you go back in the 19th century, you might see more diseases, but I think those started to be eradicated and would be eradicated more and at a faster rate if we had more freedom to combat those sorts of diseases. We had less regulations. I think this applied to COVID too. I think the government had a pretty bad response to that. If we had a more free system, I think the FDA was holding things back, which maybe could have saved many, many, many lives if there weren't this laborious approval process. If people could experimentally take drugs instead of having to wait for a bureaucrat's permission to take a drug. So I think there would be all kinds of improvements in the healthcare sector if we had more freedom there.
All right, this is I want to bring up more topics, but why don't we save this for another day? Why don't we? I would love for you to call back in. This was very illuminating, very interesting. Always enjoy debating with people who disagree. Although I think it was a more, a more casual conversation we had. I do think we found a common ground where this country should let more immigrants in, although we disagree with various things that surround that. But Dan, thanks for calling in, and please feel free to call back in anytime.
I really appreciate it, Matt. And one final question. I mentioned I had a YouTube channel. It's at Dan Norton 1, if anyone wants to check it out. But I was wondering if maybe I could post a clip of this call to my channel, if you would be okay with that.
Yeah, sure. Feel free. No problem at all.
Great. All right. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate your time.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
That was fun. I want more people to call in who don't agree with me. And that was, I think I probably should have left the medicine one for another day. I think at that point I was like, all right, it's time for another caller. But definitely calling again, Dan. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Ryan from Ontario. How you doing, Matt?
Hello? You are on the air. I'm going to have to hang up and you're going to have to call back in. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Oh, hey, it's Charlie from Washington. Let me pause this.
Hey, Charlie, can I put you up on the feed?
Yeah, go for it.
How you doing, Charlie? What do you want to talk about?
That guy. That guy. What the fuck, guy? Like all of the things that government's bad at doing this. We should let the private sector. We should get out of the way. Like, you're trading the governments for corporations, man.
Yeah, but I mean that's
every problem we have.
But he's agreeing to that system. Like, yeah, that's the difference though. Like he basically, I mean that's libertarians, or like he said, objectivists. Like that's their whole thing. They want to be there at the beginning of the system being set up, because then they'll be at the top of that system. I mean, there's no other way around it, because you don't want to be one of the plebs, one of the peons in that system, because it just doesn't.
Well, see, that's the thing. They all think that they're going to be able to climb the top and be all set and good. They're not thinking about people above them kicking down and kicking the ladder out from behind them and anything. Oh my! That was so infuriating.
I mean, it's been a while since I've spoken to a libertarian, so I was a little bit, I was a little bit taken back by some of the things. I
wanted so desperately to ask him, do you think companies should be allowed to falsely advertise and get away with it? Like, if I own a chemical company and it's cheaper just to take, to let you go to court for decades and decades and decades until you die, if I dump a whole bunch of toxic waste on your lawn, that would be in my self-interest, right? When you hand billionaires money, they keep it. That's what they do with it. They don't help people. They keep it using that philosophy. I mean, caller, if you're still watching, please, I am begging you, call into the Majority Report and talk to Sam Cedar, because he would love. I
actually looked him up because he said he had this channel. I think he's called into the show, the Majority Report, before.
Please call in again. It would make his Pride Month. It really fucking would.
Like
really would.
If you look up his name, Dan Norton, the Majority Report channel comes up. It looks like Sam has spoken to him before.
He's been jonesing for more libertarian calls, especially since he's trying to get
Sam will always take it. I'm just saying if you're fiending for that material right now, you could actually go catch it right now. It's online. Sam's spoken to him before.
I do. Yeah. I do want to briefly mention yesterday when you had callers in and they were talking about the API strike thing that Reddit forums are going on strike over. Right. Kind of hit me how important Reddit has become to me, because a lot of the forums on there that I'm most worried about not being able to really moderate anymore. There's a lot of queer forums that where people go to get help, and I've actually gotten help there before. I've given help, a lot more help,
Right.
And
Right. Yeah. I mean, Reddit is,
really
I think,
like it was, it kind of hit home how important it was to me, which is silly, but there aren't a whole lot of safe spaces. There aren't a whole lot of safe spaces on the internet for queer people to go, especially if they're in the closet, or they're surrounded by conservative family, or they know that if they come out to their family, they'll get kicked out. They're places people go to, like, hey, is it okay if I bring my partner to Pride even though she's straight and I'm bi? Or hey,
I think the issue is, and maybe not the issue, but one of the things going on here is that, the old internet, the early internet, I don't mean the super early internet. I'm not talking about IRC forums and shit like that. I'm chats, I should say. I'm talking about late 90s, early 2000s,
I remember
just pre-social media era, or even just the early days of Friendster and MySpace. Internet message boards and forums.
Yeah.
Internet message boards and forums were big. That's where you'd spend most of your time. That was the social media of its era. But the difference was that these message boards and forums were extremely niche. There wasn't some big mainstream public square where everyone went to the same platform to talk about everything from, superhero movies to politics to, I don't know, cooking to whatever. There wasn't this Facebook, Twitter type thing going on. It was specific niche forums that just dealt with specific topics. And that's where you would go. And it was very clear for a lot of these niches that this was just, what was important to them, because it wasn't necessarily a monetary place. So there's not money in all these different things. And so the people who went to these forums actually went, and the people who ran these forums actually did it because it's what mattered to them. And then social media came along, and everyone basically went to one centralized location, or a few centralized locations to talk about every topic under the sun. But these were companies who did not care about the content, did not care about the topics of conversation, did not care about whatever niche you were there for. They cared about monetizing the platform, the technology, the space in which you had those conversations. And what you're seeing now is the fallout of people leaving those niche spaces, like those message boards and forums, for these broader tech company run platforms. And it was a mistake. And I think Reddit slickly, I think they fell into it accidentally, really, but they were able to recreate that whole niche forum idea, which is why I think people feel so strongly about Reddit as opposed to other social media platforms, because they were still able to sort of sequester into these little like-minded clubs on Reddit via the subreddits, and still feel that, I guess, camaraderie of, the old school internet forums and message boards. But at the end of the day, they were still on this big platform. I don't know what's going to come out of this. I think we're going to see a very different internet in the coming years. We're already seeing Twitter and Reddit trying to monetize their platforms. I think Reddit, Facebook and Instagram are heading in that direction too. I actually think Twitch is doing that as well with the various policy changes, although, it baffles me how Amazon runs Twitch. They could easily do so much more with it, but they don't. I think YouTube is probably going to end up coming out the strongest of all these platforms as the one that's going to end up changing the least. They've already gone through most of their big changes. They've stood the test of time. They're the video platform, at least long-form video platform. I think TikTok is going to continue, to hold on to their stranglehold, I guess, on short-form video. But I think in terms of the text content for places, it's going to be very different, I think. And I hope we go back to the age of the forum and message board, because that's really the best way to go about it. We should not be putting some of this in the hands, a lot of this, quite frankly, in the hands of big tech. YouTube, I get it costs a lot of money to run a video platform, but there's no need to for, like, if you're going on your favorite movie forum on movie subreddit, or like you said, your favorite LGBTQ community subreddit, there's no need to use Reddit as a platform. Someone should build their own, someone who actually cares about the community should just put together a message board or forum, and all those users should go there, because Reddit's not providing you anything that you can't afford yourself. It costs very little to run even a high trafficked, mainly text platform. It really does not cost that much.
I'm sure that if Reddit ever really does just go down completely and it just or becomes completely unusable, we haven't seen Elon Musk running around with a sink in it yet, so it's probably okay for a little while. But even if it does go down, there'll be another place. It was just kind of one of those moments where I stepped out of myself for a moment and just realized, hey, this is kind of an important thing for people to have. It's I forget what it was, a video on YouTube or a documentary, but they were talking about gay bars closing down, and a lady was talking about how sad she was because not only was it a good place for her to go just because she could be open there, but she'd meet other gay people. They talk about advice, things that they need. They deal with some of these people. They don't really have families anymore because they came out and got kicked out. And they would go and get their found family experience there and stuff. And it was kind of cool to recognize what those forums were before they disappear. And like you said, somebody probably needs to just make a board, and they'll probably do that, honestly. But
someone pointed out in the chat right now that it's about the discoverability, and I agree. That's one of the things that Molten it's about discoverability. Yeah, yes. That's obviously one thing these platforms provide. But people will. We found these forums back in the 90s and 2000s when search was shittier than ever. There was no real good search engine then. We were looking up shit on Dogpile and Yahoo and Lycos.
I remember when AOL used to send us frisbees and Coke coasters.
Yes,
all
yes.
The time.
Emmy says it's called this. Emmy said it's called Discord, Matt. No, Discord is another platform. You can't trust Discord either. Discord is not open source. You can't host a Discord server on your own, your own server. You're putting your community in the hands of Discord, and maybe you're fine with that. Maybe you trust Discord more than other companies. They just did that thing where they're forcing everyone to use a unique username, and people are pretty pissed about that. Let's say you've been going by at Sam on Discord for half a decade now, because they would do the thing where you could use anyone could use the same username. They would just tag a numeral code after it. So you would be at Sam, but it was really at Sam number 9348 or whatever. But still, when someone would just tag at Sam in the forum you were in, the Discord server you were in, it would still go to you. They're now forcing people to pick unique usernames. So if someone already takes at Sam, you got to find some new username. And people are already tagging the wrong people now. And private messages are going to the wrong people right now. It's a bit of a mess. And that's a very small thing, a small example of an issue with a platform that's not yours. When I'm talking about forums and message boards, people would basically download open source free software like PHP board and things like that. And they would set up a forum that they wholly owned all the data on their own server or hosting provider. And if they wanted to move all of that data, they could easily do that. They would just, transfer the content from one hosting provider to another. You can't do that with building communities on platforms that are not yours.
Yeah, I was going to say it is a fine example, though, to your last caller about what happens when you leave things to private profit interests and hope that they'll do the right thing or do a good thing or benefit people for society. Because the moment it's no longer profitable to do it, no matter how much you need it, they'll stop. Like, and that's fine. If a private company doesn't want to do something because it's not going to be able to make money off of, but we still need it, fine. Let the government do it. They don't want to do it. It needs to happen. And people shouldn't be charged an arm and a leg for it. Let them do it. Like, I'm sorry. I come from the opinion that, sure, governments are bad. They do a lot of bad things. Corporations, in a lot of ways, are worse. They just don't really have an army. But they do get a lot of people killed and keep chugging along anyway. So, but
yeah, I fully agree that corporations are much worse.
Honestly, most of the
I mean, the government's basically does for the most part the bidding of the lobbyists that are hired by these corporations. Yes.
Every problem that people have with the government that I talk to, like, it's because they do what their corporates told. They're the middlemen. The thing you hate is the corporations. Like, you keep saying you want the government to be run like a business, and in a lot of ways it is, and that's why everything doesn't work. But anyway, I'll let you go. I'm done yelling at you about.
No, great call, Charlie. Always a pleasure. Have a great night.
Yeah, you too, bud.
Bye. Well, I see that there was someone calling in before who I promised I would take their call early yesterday. Let me make sure. Let me let them know to call in. Here you go. Here we go. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Ooh. Brady Niels from New York City.
Hey, Brady from New York. I was looking out for your call, and I just saw it. What would you like to talk about? I remember you called in yesterday. I think you wanted to talk crypto, which is great. So what specifically did you want to talk about? Or if you want to talk about something completely different, too, it's totally fine as well.
Well, crypto, money, and everything related in between, I guess.
Sure. Let's. I don't know if we're able to hit them all up in this conversation, but let's. Why don't you throw something specific out there, and we could start there and see where the conversation takes us.
Ooh. Well, let me see. I guess let me start with my background, and maybe that'll help grease the wheels. Because I came to crypto from a monetary standpoint, and I think that's kind of made me I think I call it a Bitcoin heretic, but I'm not 100% sure. So a lot of my thoughts on crypto are contrary to the majority because it's convoluted, but basically came to crypto from a monetary perspective back in 2012 and finally got around to buying some in 2013, and it definitely taught me more of what I didn't know about money, which kind of makes me the heretic part. So it's a weird space to be in.
What do you mean?
Like most of you're familiar with the term Bitcoin maxis.
Oh, yes.
So most of their firmly held beliefs I find patently incorrect or hilariously false at best. But it's a belief that they have, and it's something that they share with a lot of other maxis and what have you. But it isn't like the concept of having a max supply, and that 21 million makes Bitcoin the best, and that's what money should have, is a fixed supply, so that the money printers and the government can't inflate it into nothingness. The problem is, without elasticity in a currency supply, your economy does not grow, thus it can't expand or improve or raise the living standard of those using it. So it's sort of they like it for its gold features, but gold didn't work as a currency because we don't use it today, but they don't quite put the two and two together. It's hard to describe, but yeah.
Sure. Right. I think I'm not quite following. But so what is your position then? So when you called, I expected usually someone with your I don't know too much, but you gave a very very basic outline of your views, but you're not like exactly pro crypto, but you are for some aspects of.
I would say I'm pro because I use it, but what
do you use it? What do you use it for?
I use it for an income.
But that's not exactly. But that's really not what it's supposed to be used for, though, right? Like that's not the.
Well, it's an investment, so it's guess as a vehicle or a vehicle that provides income.
That's also not really what it was originally set out for either, though. Like Bitcoin, for example, was not meant to be an investment. It was meant to actually be on the playing field with the U.S. dollar and become a global currency.
Sort of. That's where it gets a little nebulous because I don't think there's a lot of good research or good. Basically, what they're saying makes sense, but not in practice.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I agree with the second part. It also doesn't make much sense to me.
It's very abstract. So when talking about currency and money, it's because it's a thought abstraction and not a piece of gold anymore. You have to tie in the concept of credit into it, and since the actual definition of quote money has been changed on us over the past how many ever 100 years you want to go back. Sure, it started as a gold nugget, but if you put that in your goldsmith's bank and he gives you a little paper receipt, oh, now we have fiat currency. So there's a lot of steps that are in the process of money changing that we haven't really been kept up to speed on. So they just tell us, oh, the Fed prints money and they know what to do with interest rates.
I mean, I guess the physical and the name of this is money. Fiat has changed. Money, I should say, but fiat currency has basically existed. In its most basic form, it's the standard in which we decide to trade goods and partake in commerce. You. Give me the standard currency, and I give you the product or service that you want, and it goes on from there. So I think it's pretty. The general abstract of it has always existed. It's just what exactly is seen as the currency in that particular moment in time. But so let's get more back to you said you use it as an investment. Are you a full-time crypto trader?
Trader, no. Trading squiggly lines gets you less money than you had before.
Okay, so how do you
investing?
So you you stake your tokens? Is that what you do?
Yep.
Okay.
However, so my view on Bitcoin itself, it's a bit like gold in that you don't get anything from. You can hold it, but it doesn't do anything. It's an unproductive asset.
So what are you staking, if you don't mind me asking?
Currently, let's see if I can. Cardano is one.
I had a regular caller for a bit who was a big Cardano guy.
Well, what I find interesting in crypto is the occurrence of those people. I say those because I guess I came from one. But it was Bitcoin, but I'm not a maxi, so it's kind of a weird. But those that, I don't want to say glom onto one project, but either the first one they find is the one they stay with, which can happen, but from a investor's perspective, it's more of where is the best place, who treats your capital the best, i.e. who pays you to own it, where do you get the most returns? That's why holding Bitcoin is fun, but it doesn't generate or there's no growth. There's no, I don't want to say the word inflation.
No, I know what you're saying. There's no staking program in which the Bitcoin powers that be are providing you with high yields for basically staking your
Right.
Bitcoin in any particular
at
program
least,
or whatever. Right.
at least on the protocol level, there's no interaction with accumulating more units of something if you stake it, or a lot of AI terms are coming out with not pruning, but there was something close to staking. I can't remember it, but it basically doesn't. There's no protocol layer receiving of more units. It's just the mining, which I did in 2014 and 15, and that was a learning experience. I definitely should have just purchased the Bitcoin outright, but getting these little machines to tinker around with, certainly it was worth the education, but I came away with more knowledge and less money, so it was sort of
right. So you're not a particular fanboy for any crypto. You're just a pure investor. You go to whatever crypto is going to provide you with the highest yield for staking, and that's where you invest your money.
I would say value maxi.
Value maxi
is a phrase I'd have to steal from a YouTuber I've watched, because he kind of comes from the same approach of, yes, you can get paid to wait if you put your Bitcoin on an options market and you sell covered calls against it, but that kind of takes some learning to do, and it isn't really a protocol layer thing. The proof of stake assets that offer the staking features, well, then it's just all right, so what's the inflation rate? What's the percentage? How many other people are staking? Then it's just figure out which, not which team, but figure out which protocol you see having value in the next 18 to 36 months, and then just go from there. So his approach is more from the investor side and the dollar cost averaging, but also trying to figure out, hey, do these assets actually do anything? So his show I watch a lot and is helpful. There's only a few people that I actually would not trust my opinion with, but go to refine my opinion on, what I think about XYZ topic or protocol layer, token, what have you.
So I will say I do respect the I guess the value maxi more than the specific token fanboy.
It took me 13 years of 2013, it took over a decade of trying to find money.
So how did you so is Cardano your main moneymaker?
No, so back to that. So Cardano's one, Cosmos, Atom is another one, Near is another one.
Now, when we talk about, so is staking your full-time thing? Is this your main moneymaker?
It isn't percentage-wise, and it's with the sort of, I guess, the macro and crypto market all going sideways. It isn't paying as much as it used to. So moneymaker-wise, you'd have to go further out, and instead of staking your tokens, you'd have to bring them to a DEX or a place that provides liquidity, or you can go out on the Ether is a whole other world.
Right.
But with comparative to market cap, what's on the Cosmos Station ecosystem, I think, could be 20 billion, but what's out in Ether land could be 130. But there's a lot of, personally, what I look for are DEXs that have liquidity pools. But there are some people I follow on YouTube that are into the Ether making DAI tokens in that.
Now, where?
So there's a lot to it than just staking.
Right. What's the average yield we're talking about here? When a term, like, what is your return here?
So the Cosmos specifically, I think is, I don't know what it's currently, but I think it's around 20%.
Jeez.
But keep in mind, the asset isn't worth as much as it used to be. So you're getting 20% of the asset. And I think I'm trying to remember what the lockup period is. But it's basically your assets are, quote, in a vault being I'm delegating my votes to a validator via my tokens for a 21-day lockup period. And if I wish to unbond them, I would then have to, sign the message with my private key and then wait 21 days, and then I can take my tokens and sell them or do whatever I want with them. So if the protocol is staking over, I think, 3/4 of the total available tokens, the inflation is 20%. If it goes below, I think it goes down to 7%. So it adjusts as people are interacting with it. So it's sort of a moving. It's not like Bitcoin where it has a fixed supply. It has a fluctuating supply, but it is worked into the tokenomics of the protocol. So there's more to it than just Bitcoin Gold. It's like, imagine the whole banking system behind currency and credit works better than just a gold coin. So it's kind of, crypto is sort of that on steroids, whereas BTC is I'd call it the bridge in belief that the gold coin has value. Well, why? Well, because someone else accepts it. So since that's been going on for 500 years, now it's the digital belief in, well, you have your airline miles, your credit card points. So we've already had digital ledgers, but not something that we, quote, think is gold. So that's why I think the government had a little something to do with, hey, here's this cryptographic whatever, let's put it out there. It just seems a little too, I don't take it hook, line, and sinker, I guess is what I'm saying, which the maxis are more than willing to subscribe to.
Right. So where do you
everywhere.
But where when you generate this yield on this 20%, where is that money coming from?
It's from the protocol. So it's basically not yield in the BlockFi or Celsius or I think I could call it unleveraged yield, because the BlockFi, essentially all the scam platforms that I was able to not get wrapped up in. The only one I actually used was Nexo, but all the other ones that imploded, they had yield, but it wasn't. It was basically because they were then taking the customer's assets and collateralizing them to get dollars to basically gamble, essentially. So it was the whole FTX fiasco. That was just more creative gambling on their parts. The yield that you get, or the return you get on staking your assets on a protocol layer, is kind of like slow and steady. Sure, the 20% seems like a lot, but it's sort of like when your grandmother tells you to take your savings bonds and put them away and then in 30 years, basically I don't want to say compounding interest, but it's in that direction of monetary system. Again, it's hard to unwrap the protocol language into the traditional, I don't want to say finance language, but to your point, where does it come from? And since it is its own supply, you're essentially borrowing. I'm thinking that the future value of this token will be higher than it is now.
Right. But
So
say you cash out now though. Everyone, let's say a good chunk of people decide to cash out now. I mean, isn't that a problem?
of one specific asset?
Yes.
I think
because you're basically that yield is used, like you're saying that yield comes from where that value is going to go in that coin, where the value of that coin is going to go, which obviously you want it to go up. But there's nothing actually being generated there. Like there's no revenue from a product or a service, or even with like a savings account. You're the money you make from having your money in a savings account is from that bank. Investing the money you put in them, and then they give you a very small, it's not a 20% yield, but they give you a percentage of their investment. But it does come from somewhere. It does come from some sort of revenue they're generating. What revenue is Cardano or any of these tokens generating that would give you this, like when you decide to cash out? If you cash out right now, I'm assuming, and no one else is, I'm assuming you'll be fine, and they'll just sort of like a Ponzi scheme, give you money from someone else, and then hope that that person keeps staking and that the coin goes up, and then they could pay out other investors who choose to cash out later on. Yeah. But if everyone decides right now or not even everyone, just enough people where the percentage of yield being taken out of the system, taken out of the pool, just devalues the entirety of the coin to the point where there is that market cap is just gone. Like the actual money sitting there is just gone.
It's the money that you'd be referring to sitting there would be whatever is on an exchange's order book.
Right. And so that's going down though. You know what, right? Like
depending on how liquid the order book is, if there are enough people to purchase it at whatever price I'd be selling it at, it may not go down. So it's sort of if people are buying the token to stake it, and there are people that are selling the token after their 21-day unbonding period, then yes, the price will fluctuate, but getting everyone to do it all simultaneously at the same time is less likely. But what is more likely that will move the price to make it appear as if everyone's doing that is if 2 or 3 people have larger wallets that when they sell it on an exchange that isn't as liquid as other exchanges, the price moves down fast. So that's how you can have different prices on different exchanges, because say Coinbase exchange will have a lot more liquidity in its order book than say a decentralized exchange. So you could have the price drop lower on a decentralized exchange of the same asset. So you could do the arbitrage thing, but it might be only minutes before it corrects. So it's sort of you can watch it happen, but it's in theory everyone doing it at the same time. While it could happen, it usually doesn't, because then all the 21-day lockup periods would have to unlock at the same day, so that you could then take your tokens and, or everyone could take their chips and go home.
Right. Let's pick up this conversation and move to a different thing another day if you'd like, because I think I don't want to. I don't want to overload myself nor the audience because I think they're gonna get. I mean, I'm sort of lost in some areas, and I think you might be too. Actually, in some of this.
I will definitely return and have I'll have some points that we can breeze through.
All right, sounds good.
We'll take it small doses.
Sounds good. I will say this. I don't like the crypto space at all. I think it's all, but I will say there is a difference between someone who's just like, yeah, I just happen to be good at trading this shit, like I trade stocks, and then someone who's like pumping and pushing specific coins in order to like pump and dump. I think there's a difference.
Traders kind of lie about things.
Yes, I do think there's a difference.
Yeah.
Although it's all bad. It's all bad. But one is a lot worse than the other.
I'm more for the education side.
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for the call, Brady.
All right. Have a good night.
Take care. All right. I'll take one or two more. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Matt, it's Josh from California. How you doing?
Hey, Josh. How are you? What do you want to talk about?
I'm good. So I have a little bit of a different perspective on the whole Reddit API thing than you do, I think.
Uh-oh.
And I'm not calling in to argue, but
oh, boy.
I do think they have a right to monetize it just because it does cost money to run it. And the main consumers that are upset about this are already monetizing it. So I really don't have a problem with capitalists fighting with capitalists to get their beat.
I mean, listen, I don't think anyone's problem is that they're monetizing it. I think the problem that everyone has is that they are charging a ridiculous amount even to small developers. There's no, I mean, the pricing of it is absolutely ridiculous.
No, and I agree there. I think the communication around what's been put out, because I am a frequent Reddit user, the communication around this, like what they're upset about is not that. It's not that they're upset with the pricing. And this is not like a negotiation tactic, like, because I could see mobilizing a mob to like get them to get Reddit to drop its price. Like, that's a smart business move. Like, if you can do it, if you can sway public opinion. But there's a lot of like straight up lying about what's going on, where they've already said things like they're not going to include mod tools in their mod tools will be exempt from their API costs, like paying.
Right, I've seen that. Yeah.
Accessibility.
Right, I've seen that too. Yeah.
Yes, I've seen that, but the general communication that's going around, especially on Reddit, is not that. I've
honestly just seen that. The problem is that it's literally killing some of everyone's favorite third-party apps. And obviously, those big apps, it's a business for those developers, sure, no doubt about it, which means they definitely don't want to kill it off, but they're being forced to. Like, they're losing their moneymaker. Like, that's not something they want. They'd prefer just to pay for it if they could. Yeah, but they're literally saying they cannot pay for it because the price is so exorbitant.
Yeah, but even with the math that they released, they would have to charge their users $4 a month. It's not like...
Yeah, but how many users are gonna pay $4 a month when you've been providing a freemium service? You got to cut out all the freebies, and then B, you're gonna have to try to extract extra money out of those users who are paying. It's not a winning scenario to try to transition to in 30 days either.
No, and I get that. But I also think the whole freemium model has been bullshit from the beginning anyways. I think people should be paid for their work. And I think that sort of the model that has grown up around a lot of this stuff is sort of deceptive marketing and deceptive pricing.
Yeah, but we're not paid for our work. We put in all the content on Reddit. No one's paying us.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Well, the supposed payment would be the space to operate in and communicate with and the community.
That seems a very lopsided, unfair deal. I look at it broader than that. The general, the unwritten contract, the unwritten deal, is that you provide the platform, the users bring the data, and you let people access the user data if they're going to create interesting, cool things that help the platform out. And every single one of these apps that I've seen have a problem with this and have to shut down are apps that create a better Reddit.
I have not found them to be better. Just different. It's more of an aesthetic, personal taste than better.
Yeah, see, I'm not saying you personally, but I mean,
No,
generally, obviously, a lot of
what
people
you're saying.
prefer that experience.
No, and I get what you're saying. And I also, to all of the people losing their shit in chat about how mods work for free, that's not the discussion that we're having. If you want to talk about how mods work for free and how they should be paid, like Facebook mods and
I mean,
YouTube
Reddit
mods and all that kind of stuff, I absolutely 100% agree. So that's not even the discussion. You guys are not understanding. Anyways.
But also, Reddit has been running this for how long now? And there's been no issue. It's not like they are going broke and need to find out some what's going.
I mean, they've never been profitable.
I mean, that's not why they're doing this though. The reason they're doing this is because they want to go public this year because they want to cash out.
I agree with you.
Look at how Reddit's CEO Steve Huffman, how he's been over the years in terms of just like the tone. His tone has completely changed. He's gone from like, I'm one of you guys, I'm a Redditor too, to have you seen the statements he's put out? It's like the dude the dude can't cash out quick enough. He's a completely different guy. He sounds completely different. I've been reading this guy's statements and posts and Reddit updates over the years, and it's like a completely different person running the company now.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. He's a dickhead, and he's only gotten worse. That happens to people as they get more money. I don't disagree with you. Like, that's a common sickness, and he's only getting worse, and he wants out, and he probably wants his money when he gets out because most of his wealth is probably in stock. So, he's just trying to take it public and get out.
That's what Twitter did. They fucking Elon they got that offer in writing from Elon, and they couldn't wait to fucking throw Twitter off of their backs and onto his. I mean, they didn't give a shit what happened to it.
Yeah, no, they don't. They don't care about at all. I agree with you.
So that's why I don't have any
sympathy for them. I feel like it's I'm confused about the argument by, like, it really just seems like it's an argument of smaller businesses against a bigger business to me for the majority of it.
I mean, I will definitely side with like some like small time solo developer who actually does provide the vast majority of the platform that he's built for free to people to use. And just like, I have no problem with that guy. He's not my enemy. In fact, I could find I could be an ally with a guy like that over to the big corporation. I mean, the guy who made that Apollo app, I've been reading his stuff, and the dude seems like a decent guy. I don't got no problem with it. I don't view him as some like petty bourgeoisie type small business owner. He's just the indie developer who made something cool and people liked it, and he was like, oh shit, this could be my job. And so he created a premium plan. Like, that's not a guy who's like out to like gouge people on a service. Like, these are people who enjoy.
You could say that, but you don't know what he's making. Like, if he's making $500,000 a year or whatever, like,
I mean, if he's making $500,000,
I mean, but you're just at that point. You're just arguing over how much people deserve to get paid over what they.
But I don't care about what he's getting paid. Whatever he's getting paid is obviously less than the amount it takes to keep the app running. What I care about is this platform, that people enjoy, can no longer be used because of the greed of a corporation. I mean, that's practically what it is.
I guess I just don't agree with you. I think it's both sides being greedy, and I don't think he's shutting down because he couldn't make a.
But why would he shut it down? It obviously is a moneymaker for him. Let's say I think I read that on the last estimate I saw was he had like something like 700,000 to 1 million users of the Apollo app. There's a premium fee, $2 a month or something like that. Let's say, I don't know. Let's say 50,000 people are paying him for Apollo. Out of the million people using it, that's 2 times 50,000. What is that? $100,000 a month. That's like what he's making 1.2 million a year. That's not 20 million that he needs to keep the app alive, according to Reddit's new API charges. I mean, that's.
But that's if you take his numbers at face value. Like it's just people are blindly taking one side over the other, and again, they're both just companies, and that's why I have a problem with it. Is I don't think anybody's being honest on either side about any of this. Like, I just think that the app developers who I work with constantly, like, are fucking liars, and they will screw people, and they'll lie about numbers, and they'll fudge things and whatever.
But if he was making more than $20 million, he would pay it. I mean, obviously. I mean,
yeah, but you're also accepting his math. You're accepting that.
But it's not like this is just his problem. This is any student, any indie developer, any Joe Schmo who decides to go into tech, who's got no funding, no money whatsoever, but this is what he wants to do. This is basically one less platform for them to build upon.
Okay. So?
I mean, but then what do they build? What do they build? Like, that's the purpose of, like, if you look at what every small developer who literally, what does it cost to start your own thing online? A fucking domain name and some hosting, right? You get shit started for $10. Right. But you know how hard it is to build your own platform from scratch, and you're a lot less likely to succeed. By using these other platforms' APIs, you basically get to build upon successful platforms, and in return for doing that, you get to obviously, the exchange is you get to build on top of an already successful platform, giving you an already established user base that could be interested in your service. And on the flip side, the platform is getting something out of it because these apps create more use, encourage more use of their platform. It's generally been, over the years, that's why the APIs have been free for so long, a win-win on both sides. You take that away from developers, and what you're going to get is a system in the tech industry that's even more insular, even more incestual, where only people who can afford to get funding because they have connections, or can afford because their rich parents are funding them to build their own platform, they're the only people who can pull this off, or their rich parents pay for the API fees. And
but that's not really what happens, because a lot of these companies that just end up, and most of them end up getting acquired is really what happens, and you get
that's not what's happening here.
Well, it is not with this particular one, but Reddit's particular app is one that they acquired. So maybe they're shutting down.
Under the new API system, that app that they bought would have never gotten to that point to even generate the interest from them to buy it.
Right, but my point is that, so for example, moving away from just Reddit, there are all kinds of, small apps that don't need a huge user base, because there are it takes time, it's not immediate or whatever, but you build the user base by putting a good product out there, and sometimes you don't make a lot of money off of it for a long time, and that's okay. If you really care, if that's what you really care about, is putting out the good product and whatever, you don't need a huge built-in user base, and sometimes you run it as a hobby. For example, one of the programs that I use frequently is Tableau. They just acquired a whole shit ton of because they didn't have the talent in-house to do it. They acquired 4 different startups that 2 of which were funded, 2 of which they just did on their own in their free time, and it was something they were passionate about or whatever, and they're integrating it in their platform. All these guys are going to be multi-millionaires. They have to stay at Tableau for a couple of years, which is part of Salesforce now, which also got acquired. But you know, like that whole ecosystem around all of this stuff exists, and people build stuff from scratch all the time without a built-in user base, without using other people's APIs. There's data sets galore free out there.
There are a ton. Pretty much almost every platform now is using someone's API. I mean, if we get to the point where all these companies start,
but they pay for them.
Not every single one, and a lot of them are a lot more affordable than Reddit and Twitter's
I'm not
API
disagreeing
plans.
with you that Reddit's pricing structure is silly.
I mean, the guy who runs Apollo basically said that what Reddit wants to charge him tens of thousands of dollars for per month, he pays the same amount to Imager, that image sharing website, like $100 a month for the same amount of API calls and everything.
Yeah, and that's great, but we have to take a look at that.
I don't see why this guy would lie. He basically has. I don't, being that he has an app that's beloved. Period. Like this whole thing is mainly, it's happening because of a number of apps, but his is like the biggest of them all, so it's getting the most attention. He doesn't need to farm for sympathy. People enjoy his app and they're pissed they're losing the app. Like, he has nothing to gain from lying for this. It would actually just hurt his case.
Yeah, I actually don't believe that. I don't believe it would hurt his case at all. Whatever gets out first is what people believe. So, there are people that are gonna, believe to the day they die that Reddit has cut off access to accessibility apps, or are charging accessibility apps money. They're not, and you can argue that
all I've seen is that Reddit is. I've seen this over and over again. I don't know where you've seen that they're not. It's in pretty clear.
Post that they're posting across every sub that are blind is very angry because they're getting rid of accessibility apps. It's bullshit. They're not. And something went down the wrong pipe. I apologize.
Right. I haven't seen that. I have seen. If I was a blind user, if I needed accessibility though, use these accessibility apps, I would be worried though, because we're basically now on. Reddit's just one step away from if they want to change it again. Really, what's to say they wouldn't? They've already basically thrown this wrench in everyone else's app. What's to say that they won't do the same again?
If they do, because that's kind of a slippery slope fallacy. But if they do, then yeah, I fully agree with everybody where it's not just a money issue or an aesthetic issue or whatever, where it's something that people really truly need this to, whether it's coloring or whether it's reader or something like that. If that's what happens, then yeah, absolutely, like burn their site down. That's one thing, but I just find the arguing over pricing to be, again, like, I don't care. And I just think it's, there are different data sets out there. Like, if you want to build an app off a data set, use the government. They're free. Like, there's literally millions upon millions of data sets out there to build stuff off of. Like, or go out there and advertise your own database, like, or at your own website. Like, invest the time. So, I get it. I get why people are upset, but I disagree. I think it's taking sides in something that neither side has your best interests at heart.
I don't know, man. It sounds like you're doing the same argument that, like, why don't you start your own why don't you start your own multi-million-dollar conglomerate if you don't like it?
No, because there's not if you're talking about oil or gas or like electricity or whatever, that's one thing. But I've never really bought the public square argument about Twitter either. Like, it's not the public square. The public square is the public square. If you want it to be the public square, then it needs to be nationalized. Like, otherwise, I don't see the art. Like, it's a private.
But no one's asking for the government to intervene here.
No, I know, but I'm saying, like, I'm not saying start. It's the same. I disagree that it's the same thing where, because they're for a forum, which bulletin boards still exist. And
Yeah,
you
but
know,
Reddit has what, like something like
has cornered the market. I agree with you.
15, 20 years now too of cornering the market. I mean, you're not gonna just come on in and create the next Reddit.
Not overnight, no. But
All right.
you know, everything has to start somewhere. And so like, if you want to start your own, then you know, that's fine. If you want to try, Blue Sky's trying to or Mastodon and all of these places are trying to compete with Twitter now. Like, that's fine. You can start your own. A lot of these places start small and get acquired, and you don't have to make the choice to get acquired. Like, you don't have to take the money. When you come up with something better and you really care about it and you want to put it out there to the public, those things will take time to develop. But you know, if you just sell to the biggest corporation as soon as they come offering you money, then that's that's a choice that you're making. But yeah, it's not like there's massive startup capital needed for a messaging app or a bulletin board or something like that. And
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
I mean, you don't have to agree. I just think that lots of companies start small and build their way up without a lot of startup capital.
Right. Yeah, that's. I guess with the agree to disagree on the broader Reddit issue or the API issue in general, really.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, everything I work with has an API and we have to pay for all of them. So I'm not too pressed about it. Like, we're a small company too, and they charge us, and it is what it is. Like, that's just part of operating in the information space.
Right. Yeah.
So
well, have a great. Always a pleasure, Josh. We usually agree on more than we don't, but this is not one of those times.
Yeah. No.
But it was good talking with you.
One last thing, wrestling related. Do you think they're setting Punk up for failure?
No.
With announcing these shows after the markets are already sold out for Dynamite and pay-per-views, or they're still calling them pay-per-views, right? They're not premium live events for AEW.
No, I think I'm not sure actually. But no, I think they're not setting him up for failure.
So they're just incompetent, or what?
No, I think. What do you mean? They'll be fine. He'll come out and get a big pop.
No, I don't mean on the initial show. He'll do great in Chicago. People will love him. They'll go nuts. Collision is not selling well across Canada and whatever, and it's because they announced Dynamite 3 weeks ahead of time.
Oh, I've been paying attention to the arena sales and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so Collision's not selling well. It's because they announced all those shows way after they announced Dynamite. So the people who are going to spend all the money have already spent it on Dynamite, and it's in the same market. So,
all right, well,
do you think they're just incompetent, or are they setting them up?
I don't think they thought of it. Yeah, I think they might have made a mistake like that. I don't think they thought of it. I don't think that was planned out,
Yeah, I mean, it just seems very strange. It seems like a way to lose a lot of money because they still have to pay him and pay for the arena. But
yeah.
All right.
Have a great night, Josh.
You too.
Bye. I think that's going to be the show. We've gone, we're going to hit 3 hours here. Let me read some super chats here. I know a lot of people are calling in. I know, but I'm going to get to you. I'm feeling it. It's really hot in here. I don't want to do the thing where everyone's saying, "Oh my God, Matt, you look like you're falling asleep." All right. You're making me do it. One more call. One more call. Here we go. One more call. Let's do this. One more call. I'm going to randomly take the next call that comes in. Let me read these super chats first. Miss Siren with a super chat. As a woman, you must obey and procreate. That was during the interview. Buck Smelanoma with a super chat. Did they wheel out Phyllis Schifley's desiccated corpse at any point? Renee with a super chat. So when is Candace and Kanye going to establish the German National Church? I mean American, asking for Uncle Addy. Double O Govin, Double O with a $10 super chat, just heart eyes. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And C. Jiminaire with a super chat. I will say Matt's chat has the safe, home-like feel I was talking about with Queer Spaces. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Over on Twitch. Before we go to Twitch, let me take that one last call. Let's do that. Here we go. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name's Alex. I'm calling from Chicago.
Hey, Alex from Chicago. What's up? What would you like to talk about?
I had some comments on the last caller and what he was saying. Just something like a caveat.
Sure.
Well, while it's true, I'm also somebody that works in the tech industry as well. While it is true, there are our data sets, but the guy already built his business. So it isn't this just like, oh, flippantly, just abandon something that's literally giving you income. Whatever that income may be, they just deleted his entire income by doing that. It's gone. And like, oh yeah, you could go build another, go just, flippantly go grab some other data set. But there's a reason why he was successful with that data set. It's because he made an app that he's passionate about, that people liked on that data set. He can't just flippantly go, I'm going to go to Twitter now. No one's going to pick it up.
He definitely can't go. He definitely can't go to Twitter now.
and I think this is one of these things that get past people on the left. I don't know if that's true. Maybe just like most of us, is that this isn't by accident. When Elon started this, every CEO looked up and went, "Oh, well, shit, we can do that."
Yeah.
And went, "Oh, there's another money-making opportunity." They don't really care if the app's feasible or if anyone else is producing an app that actually funnels more traffic to them, because most of them don't really know, because they're just getting notes from everyone underneath them that actually do the work. Right? I mean, it's not like a CEO is piling over
these
their
third
analytics.
party. Yeah.
There's a guy that does that for him. They just say, "Oh, good, they're in the green. Great, that's awesome." And then say some jargon about synergy or something, and walks off and gets his coffee or whatever. But yeah, my guess is that guy's a developer too. I tend to find that at least with some that I've interacted with a couple companies, it's not anything bad, but they're like a highly sought after commodity. So like if they flippantly just leave a company because it goes under or gets bought out, it's kind of just like natural. That's kind of what's supposed to happen. There's really no tangible, like this isn't some company that was built by angel investors to basically prototype new features for Microsoft. Like this is some guy's livelihood that they just deleted because they got greedy over something that arguably is generating them revenue by funneling traffic to them.
Right. And if the idea is that I think I said this yesterday when I was streaming, if the idea is that the problem is that these clients don't serve ads, then just make that a rule where you can't have access, but you need to have the ad API calls come through too. Like you can't block
make
that.
It serve a token that they have to issue back.
It seems very simple, and they would probably make more money that way. But
I mean, there's even a potential for them to get their own deals through them and maybe that's the reason why they didn't do it is, well, then they would just go to that third-party app because that's where the people are going anyways.
Right.
Right.
And I do think like, you know, I'm not
don't
so worried per se about, you know, the developer of Apollo. Like, you know, he made a lot of money. He'll be fine. Obviously, if I was him, I'd be pissed that, you know, you're losing this income stream. But I think it's a very dark future of the internet where these APIs are going to basically cut off entire, like there's not many like, you know, think outside the tech industry. Leaving just the tech industry, the internet specifically. You can't just open a restaurant with no money. Like you can't be a kid out of college with no funding, no moneyed parents, the working class kid and fucking
I grew up poor. So when I found a passion in computers, I started an entire life on it, and it ended up panning out for me.
Right.
Like, I don't know. Like, if there was no other industry, well, I'm sure there are, but the tech industry.
I don't know. I can't think of anything where the cost of entry is as low as, honestly,
it's just knowledge.
Is the internet. Like literally, you what spend you know 10. You don't even need to pay for the internet. You can go to the library. I mean, obviously that's not ideal, but it's still, the option's still there.
I mean, I have a lot of friends that are in both the infrastructure side and the developer side. They just went to one class that cost maybe a couple $100. Some of them were free through their like local community college, and they're making six figures.
Right.
That would have never been an option for them. I mean, it's just not. If you know, put that perspective against every other job, at least in the United States, you're not making that kind of money. Like, it's just not going to happen unless you're a small business tyrant and you're choking the wealth of your employees into your own pocket.
Right, but I'm not even generally talking about how much money you can make. I just mean the entry to the cost of entry, and then on top of that, you know, there's a lot of indie developers who don't get rich, but they are able to create a nice little project that brings them a nice sustainable income of like just a living wage type deal. Like, you know, maybe they'll make $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month from their app, and that's just like that's like what the average income in this country.
Or it's resume building kind of stuff. Like, look at this app I built, and then they get hired by somebody else.
Sure.
Some more, you know, bigger and stuff, or maybe even just where it's not on their own dime and they're getting paid legitimately.
Right.
Or not legitimately. But,
I mean, the obvious thing would to be to institute an ad rule where you have to have the ads in the API. To me, that makes the most sense. If you have to charge for the API, it should at the very least be some sort of affordable amount that doesn't completely. And I would even take a step further and work with each individual app. Maybe it's hard at a certain level when you have so many, if you do have so many third-party developers. But I mean, the idea that you would kill off your biggest app over this is ludicrous. It's so short-sighted. So short-sighted.
And you can see it in a lot of other places too, like IoT devices as well. There's no reason why, say, you know, your Ring can't connect to, you know, name of, you know, like Google Home or whatever. There's no reason for that. It's just because they restrict the APIs. It's because you can't, you know, pull that video stream from our platform. You can't look. I mean, even if you look at stuff like that, space is ripe with it, where, you know, you buy a door lock and it only works with one particular provider, but then they'll say, oh, it works with, you know, Google. With Google, it'll work with Home Assistant, will work with this. But then when you look in and dive in the details, whoever owns the top level of it, say it's like a Google one, they'll get all the features. They'll get the ability to like see if it's locked, see if it's, you know, lock and unlock, win it, all the different little features that thing could have. And the third parties will just get like an on-off switch, which is kind of a disadvantage for all of them for something that is completely arbitrary. That is just a switch that they have to expose. It's not, I don't know. It seems extremely like old tech, like it used to be back in the day of Commodore 64s and stuff, like where you bought that particular system. Maybe it was Compaq. You bought the printer, you bought the mouse, you bought the screen, because it's all proprietary and you couldn't get out of the loop. And it's just, yeah. And that stopped because I believe the United States government stepped in along with some industry people saying this is stupid. You need to let people buy your stuff and just make the best printer or whatever that you can. And it made the industry just worse. But it seems to be tailing, at least in some part, that way. Maybe it's not with general computing, but it's with all this new stuff that's cropped up.
Right. All right. Great call. Thanks for the call.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, man. Peace.
Have a great night.
You too.
All right. That's the show. Oh, wait. There was another super chat that came in. Thank you, Kowalski, for the super sticker. And Ryan Lennon fan with the super chat. I think that a third-party Reddit app developer got with that one caller's wife. Oh, talking about Josh. That's not nice. That's not nice. But it's funny. All right, folks. That is the show. Oh, who should I rate on Twitch? And of course, patreon.com/MattBinder if you can become a monthly paying subscriber. Once again, it's been a rough, if you're not already a subscriber, it's been a rough month. A lot of cancellations due to financial issues, loss of jobs. So if you're someone who can afford to do it and been thinking about pulling that trigger, now is the time to do it to help me not see my Patreon subscribers whittle away. Who should I rate on Twitch? Raid Blair White. That'd be pretty funny, wouldn't it? Is she on? Because that would be funny. No. Who's on right now? I see someone said Willow. Who's Willow? I feel like I've rated Willow before, but it's been a while. Let me check just to see what's going on the stream. Oh yeah, sure. Let's raid Willow. Sounds good to me. All right, everyone. I'll see you all next time. Oh, Thursday. Majority Report, Leftist Mafia. I'll see you all then. Have a great night, and see you all next time on Doomed.